Okay, so this is ready to roll. Okay, this is the Western Select Board for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. It's currently, Stephanie, thank you. Good night. Currently 7:25 p.m. And sorry to everybody that we're a little late. Obviously, we get a pretty full slate of topics. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. In order for anybody who's watching this on cable television right now and would like to come in either on their phone or through the internet, the phone dial-in number is 646-558-8656. And meeting ID for either phone or internet is 853-4063-4836 with a passcode of 480140. There is an ongoing series of regional vaccination clinics taking place here with Newbury at the town annex. There was one last night, so that doesn't help anybody at this point. But there's another one for next Monday, January 24th, and for the following Monday, January 31st. All vaccines are available for all eligible age groups. This includes first, second, and booster doses, and also kids, I think, are involved or eligible for this. Yeah, they are. So that's a good thing. If you're not vaccinated yet, or not fully vaccinated yet, please consider doing it here in the next couple of weeks. Thanks. Also, we have a new Council on Aging newsletter that was part of the packet. Anybody who is signed up for the newsletter or is eligible for the newsletter will be receiving it in the mail. I'm not sure when they actually go out.
I know it went to the printer last week, okay. And I think it was 7 to 10 days. I know they're trying to get it out as quick as they can,
okay.
But it should be, later this month.
Okay.
And in the meantime, it is posted to the COA webpage as well.
Right.
I believe it was posted to their Facebook page.
Okay, great.
I'm pretty sure it was.
So there's a lot of good info in there, and if you're eligible for any of the senior type stuff, which I think we're probably all of us are now. Not yet. It'll happen. So
I already aged out of it.
Aging out of it, I would think that's not a good thing. Okay. All right. There's an Affordable Housing Trust Bylaw Committee listening session on Wednesday next. It's next, not this coming one, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, Wednesday, January 26th at 7 p.m. The information is online on the town website. It will be a virtual meeting via Zoom. So if you'd like to listen in on that, and Wendy, is it interactive? I mean, is there going to be any interaction with the audience? Great. Yeah. So if you want to listen in, and if you have thoughts you'd like to offer, please do so. Thanks. As always, let's call for volunteers for a variety of positions with volunteer positions with town government. And there's a listing on the town website at wnewbury.org/volunteer. This has actually been pretty effective for the last couple of months. We've had a significant number of new people volunteering, which is great because many hands make light work, and the more people are actually contributing and getting their thoughts in, ultimately the better we're able to function, the better the whole town's able to function. We see you can subscribe to the town news and announcements at www.wnewbury.org/subscribe. Great, okay. The first regular order of business is we have a request for appointment of Jill Hudson to the Historic District Commission. And Jill, you are up there. Great. How are you doing?
I'm good, everyone. How are you? Good evening.
Great. Yeah, good evening. Yeah, thanks for your interest in the position. Do you have anything you wanted to offer to say?
Only that I've been a resident of the town for just about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in May, actually. We came here to start our family. We now have 2 boys here, and one of them is in the room with me. So if you hear noises, that's why. But I was happy to be here with my husband to start putting down roots, and have just fallen in love with the town. And I'm always driving by places like Ludi Ordy or Storn or the training district, and just really want to get to know more of those precious parts of our town, and to just help out where I can.
Okay, great, good. That's a great start. I can see a long future.
I hope so.
Great. Okay. I
have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, please.
Jill, you have to tell me what a certified Scrum Master is.
Sometimes I think they just put a bunch of words together to sound good. So basically, it's one of 2 project management certificates I have. So I've been in project management for about 15, 16 years now. And it's just one of those opportunities to continue some professional growth. And it's mainly a style or a type of project management called an agile methodology. And you can get a certification in that kind. But I also have a project management professional or a PMP certification, and it's basically just showing that you're adept in a certain type of project management. And it's just kind of showing my ability to grow and to change into different industries, which I've done twice. So it's just a way to show your agility and your adeptness in whatever profession you're in. So
Interesting, thanks.
When I first saw that, I thought you were a rugby player.
That's what I thought
I
too.
wish I had said that now. Shoot. Ask me the question again, and then I'll give that answer. I'm almost done.
Now, to tell you the truth, and I saw Brad also has it on his, so I actually looked it up. Great, thanks. Any other questions?
No, I think it's great and admirable if you have a young family that you want to get involved in town government. So
Thank you very much.
I would just offer, Jill, I know you had expressed initially when you reached out some potential interest in the Historical Commission.
Yes.
We have the chair of that commission here with us tonight. I'll just turn the camera so you can see Bob Janes. And as you know, there was no opening on that, so you applied for the Historic District Commission, which is terrific. Obviously, they're all public meetings, Historical Commission, all the other boards, committees, and commissions. And so, just because you're not a member, as a resident, you should certainly feel welcome at anything. And you can subscribe to the posting of agendas for anything you're interested in, and they'll come right to your inbox, and then you can, either attend or zoom in. But the Historic District, part of why I say that, the Historic District Commission doesn't meet very often. So it's great that you're joining, and when they do have applications in front of them, they are actually a regulatory, body. But in the course of things, there hasn't been, much development or change in that historic district. So if you want more, more meetings, there's always meetings.
I've been in corporate project management. I love me a good meeting.
Good, great.
Okay. I did actually have one question, though, if I may. I was rereading through the bylaws while I was waiting for the meeting to start. The Historic District Commission, is it just for the training field district, or was that just one of them allied? I know that was specifically listed in the bylaw, and I wasn't sure if that was one of a few districts in the town that is kind of enveloped in this commission, or if that's the only one.
I think that's the only
That's the only one.
It is the only one? Okay.
I think the only formal one, but am I remembering, Archie, maybe, I don't know, Rick, if you were on the board, there were I believe there were 2 other districts that the Historical Commission was recommending the analysis to see about getting them formally designated as historic districts. Is that?
We haven't done a lot with it yet. We have a meeting tomorrow night. Bring that up.
Okay. So yeah, there might be as many as 2 more districts in the future, but as you can imagine, there's, a certain amount of documentation and who need to be jumped through for that to become formal. But I remember Elisa was in front of the board a while back, probably a couple of years ago, with that initiative, and the board did endorse, them going forward with it. I didn't know where it had gone.
Got it, okay.
Recommendation after the first historic inventory.
That's right, yeah.
So it's been a couple of years.
And I think, Jill, I think that information is probably, on the Historic Commission website. Their webpage has a ton of information. And so, yeah, there could be as many as 2 more districts added in the future.
Got it. Thank you for the info. That helps. I'll go look.
Great.
Is this the 1-year term?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Does this term run until June 30th?
You happen to have that info? I always forget to check. So, which position, which person vacated? Do you know? Let's see. It looks so. I mean, Dot's certainly still on, and Margaret's still. We think it's just through June 30th of 2022, but we'll get back to you, Jill, to confirm that.
Totally fine. Thank you.
And if so, toward the end of the fiscal year, the board, as a matter of course, typically reappoints, people who are interested in reappointment.
Okay. Would I need to resubmit an application to volunteer, or would I just stay on the list if that's the case?
No, you would be contacted by the clerk's office this spring to see if you wanted to be reappointed. And if so, the board typically votes those kind of en masse, not one by one. So they don't typically re-interview.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
I move to appoint Jill Hudson to the Historic District Commission for term ending June FY22.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thanks, Jill.
Thank
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Joe, Jim Blackford, our town clerk, will reach out to you. There's a conflict of interest stuff that has to be taken, has to be addressed, and then you'll be sworn in as well.
Okay, that's great. I'll keep an eye out for his email. He sent me some of the information for today, so I'll keep an eye out for a follow-up from him. But
Great.
thank
Okay.
you. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next on the agenda is discussion of soldier resale.
So we do have Sam, I'd asked him to do a zoning analysis. There was some zoning analysis as part of the initial work in 2019 that was part of the architect study, but Sam has drilled down, quite a bit more, and he had initially submitted the memo, I think back in December, maybe early January, and then he was part of the Board of Health meeting last Tuesday, which Rick and I also attended, and Sam did update his memo to reflect the Board of Health's vote last Tuesday, which basically set the allowable flow with a tight tank. So that information is reflected in his memo. The intent was to make sure we all had in front of us kind of clear understanding of the zoning. So Sam, do you want to turn in case?
Sure.
I don't know if you want to speak to your memo, or Rick, if you just want to see if the board has questions on the memo, or.
Well, that's probably the best. I mean, I assume you all read the memo, and it was pretty good. That's very comprehensive, Sam.
Sam, it was really, this is good. Yes, very good.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure you had, even the, I guess, ridiculous options that the zoning allowed, that probably wouldn't happen, but seemed like there was a lot of question of what could we do. So I did want to list initially what could be done as of right, what could be done with special permit, and what could be done, through 48.3, the exemptions under zoning. Once that was done, then it was really taking a look at what the limitations are, and that's really where we kind of run into a wall as to how we want move forward. But I did want to put everything out there to at least, answer anyone's questions that was questioning, are we exploring everything? Yes, that is a comprehensive list of every option available under our zoning.
Okay, and Sam, just for anyone watching from home, I doing just a share screen, and later tonight, Rick, any of the content on the packet we can just put up on the screen. But and for those who don't know, the open session packets are posted on the select board webpage. There's a link on the left side of the page with tonight's content and also prior board packets. So.
Okay, so, at some point, obviously, we need to figure out what direction to take from where we are right now. Actually, I've been working to put my thoughts down in writing, and I thought I'd have them kind of ready to present tonight, but they're not. But there's a very very narrow window, I think, of opportunity for something to be done with this building at this point in time.
So Rick, just you don't have to write them down. What were you thinking?
Well, I'll read you what I put together.
Basically, you'd be restricted to the uses in your memo, Sam, is that correct?
Can you say that again?
I said, to summarize, we'd be restricted to the uses that you've outlined in your memo. Is that right?
Yes, without going back for a change in zoning, this would be what's currently allowed.
Yep. So I'll read.
I've been thinking about cider mill all along.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'll read you what I haven't sent. At this point, it's clear that the town will not be able to renovate the Soldiers and Sailors building at an acceptable cost, with the only 2 bids received in response to the design coming in at more than 50% over remaining available authorized funding. Well over 2 years since the fall of 2019 standard special town meeting approved $1.5 million of CPA funds for design and renovation of the building, there are no proposals for realistic potential uses, municipal or otherwise. I want that right now. I'll start that sentence over. Well over 2 years since the fall of 2019 special town meeting approved $1.5 million of CPA funds for design and renovation of the building, there are no proposals for realistic potential uses, municipal or otherwise, sufficient to justify expenditure of additional town funds for renovation, even when considering the significant but intangible historic value. And that says nothing of what would become ongoing municipal operation and maintenance expenses. I voted in favor of the Soldiers and Sailors building preservation in 2019, actively supported the idea as the Board of Selectmen, at that time, Board of Selectmen, representative on the CPC, and have supported it since, but I'm done grasping at straws. As thoroughly explained in the Building Commission, in Building Commissioner Sam Jocelyn's January 12th, 22 email, which we were just looking at, included in the 1/18/22 Select Board Open Space packet, there are numerous constraints on renovation and reuse, some combination of which affects all possible plans involving this particular building on this particular site. Zoning. Residential C allows a 1 or 2 family home plus various other uses, none of which are practical for the site and or preservation of the building, given combinations of other constraints. I'm sorry, for the site size and or preservation of the building, given combinations of other constraints. Rezoning to allow other uses is highly unlikely based on history and the likelihood that abutting homeowners will object to the idea of rezoning to allow uses not currently by right. Even grandfathering the most recent use, however it's defined, is no longer possible without zoning gymnastics. West Newbury zoning bylaw, section 4A2, derived from Mass General Law, chapter 48, section 6, states if a non-conforming use has been discontinued or abandoned for a period of more than 2 years, it shall not be reestablished, and any further use shall be in conformance with this bylaw. Parking is limited to 7 spaces plus 1 handicap space in the existing lot accessed from Daily Drive. There's a possibility of on-street parking being allowed on Main Street, Route 113, but this would require review and approval by Mass DOT. If so, parking might be allowed only on the opposite sidewalk side of the highway, with a pedestrian highway crossing to access the building. Would likely require marked and widened spaces on whichever side was allowed with a corresponding lane shift toward the opposite side to accommodate the widened parking spaces on whichever side. Sorry about that. Would negatively impact driveway site distances from whichever side of the street new parking was allowed, and would present a new hazard to bicyclists who currently have a wide shoulder on both sides of the street within which to ride. In short, Main Street / Route 113 on-street parking at this location might come with a set of new safety compromises. Septic. Small parcel means insufficient space for conventional in-ground septic system and no municipal sewer system. Therefore limited to a tight tank with a design load of 220 gallons a day. This system would require maintenance by regular pumping out of the tank. And we have, the final constraint is very high renovation costs.
So
Can I just finish reading that?
Absolutely, sure.
So we vanquished over preserving this building for years and can no longer delude ourselves in imagining that some great municipal uses will appear to justify additional expense. Absent some generous philanthropist willing to renovate the building regardless of cost, coming forward between now and town meeting, I believe we should bring 2 mutually exclusive articles to West Newbury's 2022 annual town meeting for consideration by voters. 1 is to offer the building for sale at a nominal price with a well-defined historic preservation restriction for uses allowed as of right or by special permit. This would most likely be as a single family home, but need not be restricted as such. It seems unlikely that any of the other options would attract a buyer, but that should not be presupposed. And there's your starter. Renovation for appropriate reuse to be accomplished within a reasonable time and guaranteed by a sum held in escrow to be sacrificed if the obligation is not met. And 2 is to repurpose the site by designing and constructing a respectful West Newbury Veterans Memorial, honoring our town's veterans to replace the existing building, possibly listing the names of those veterans who died in service, and incorporating this into a small town park where visitors are able to contemplate the intent and the meaning of the dedicated space. The form of the memorial could incorporate design characteristics resembling the existing building and employ repurposed materials for the building as much as possible. Note that if option 1, that if the option listed as 1 is approved by voters, there's no guarantee that the buyer will come forward. If neither option is approved by the voters at the annual town meeting, we'll continue to suffer the opportunity cost of spending limited town funds and staff resources with no clear direction. You have a question?
Just what the unit is for the Board of Health meeting. And
Yeah.
so what does, I don't know what normal sewer usage is. So 200 gallons, 220 gallons a day, is that a lot? Is that a little? What does that?
Yeah, that basically supports 2 bedrooms. That's right, Bob, right? Yeah, that would basically.
10 gallons per bedroom.
That's the design flow. And, Paul said at the meeting, in reality, the actual flow is probably well less than the design flow, but that from a permitting standpoint, it would limit it to 2 bedrooms.
Okay, that would limit to 2 bedrooms and just so you have a tank that, when we talk about having it to be pumped out, stuff to be pumped out every 2 weeks or every 6 months, or how long does that mean?
No, because the tank, I think that was specified as a 3,000 gallon tank.
I think so,
Yeah,
depending on use.
Yeah, so it would depend on,
Obviously,
and generally, generally what there is, you'll have an alarm, I think, and then a redundant alarm, because if the first alarm goes, you don't want it. So, you have an alarm that tells you if you've reached the point where it needs to come. And I think there's, no pun intended, headroom in the way the alarm is set up. Yeah, something like that. Which
I-
would not be appropriate.
I thought, Paul, I'm looking at my notes from last week. I thought he said more like every month,
Okay,
but
well,
just
I
based on
just
actual
wanna
flow,
know.
probably based on design flow, it is what you're saying, but
So if it's.
it's a
3,000
recurring operating cost for whoever lives there and a significant, not
3,000
insignificant.
gallons divided by 220 is 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's very,
But
very.
in worst case, it's probably close.
Like you run, someone runs it, washing machine or whatever.
Blake, I'm looking at my notes. Blake had estimated a cost to pump of $350 to $450.
Per pump?
Yeah.
Whoa. So 2 weeks, so 26 times 350.
I think last time, I mean,
That's $9,000 in pumping costs a year. Wow.
yeah, it's a pretty significant constraint site.
I didn't know how much is the 200 gallons is, but okay.
So, yeah, I mean.
Bob, you know, is there any possibility that you could take the tank that's there out and make it bigger, or no?
This is
No
a
one
new
knows
tank.
what's there, to be perfectly honest with you.
Oh,
They would have to install a new tank.
This is the
well, this is the new one.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. So under DEP regulations, I'm paraphrasing, Bob, probably knows the detail, I'm sure knows the details a lot better. My understanding of it is the Board of Health cannot approve a tight tank for a new use. It would have to be basically, if you had a house and your septic failed, you could then come in and propose a tight tank. You couldn't come in and propose a new house with a tight tank. So that's where the design flow tracks back to what historical usage was, and where there is no design plan on record. That's where it became kind of an exercise of figuring out between, what, and Sam could speak to this because he and Paul worked closely together on this, of trying to basically think back to when it was in its heyday, what was the use, and how could you translate that forward into what kind of gallons per day could be permitted under DEP regs. Because that's the thing, they couldn't go above what the historical use would have been. So they had to try to figure out between whether social club or meeting or different types of gathering space, what do they think the design flow of the current system is? And that's probably a cesspool.
So there's two separate issues then, I mean, in terms of, so there's the zoning use, whether, what uses, and then there's the.
So
Correct, that's correct, yes.
So could the DEP, I know this is getting into the little details too much, but could the DEP say that 220 is too much, and we don't even allow that?
Yeah, if it's a 2-bedroom house, which it's never been, they could deny it, right?
We don't want to go there, because I think if anybody called DEP would probably shut the whole project down anyway. Probably for a variety of reasons. We felt that the 220, which is equivalent to a 2-bedroom home, that design would fit pretty much that neighborhood. If somebody wanted to put a house in there for a home, or use it as a home or something like that, at least they're covered, for that. And again, pumping it depends on how much you use it. So if you put 300 gallons a day in there, you're going to pump it lots of them to put it. So, and it's probably the cheaper of the options, because if you go with somebody had offered their property for a leach field, But now you gotta get, you gotta go through the legal system to get easements on 2 pieces of property, then you gotta put the tank in, pump it out to someone else's property. You know, access to private property, across private property, it becomes kind of an issue. So there are a few more things in there too, to, you know, really think about.
But if a new tank was installed, he would have to permit it, right?
No, we can do it. The local boards of health are authorized by the DEP to, instead of, you know, allow such things.
Mhm.
So, you know, we're not gonna make a decision on this tonight. Ultimately, if we decide to put a couple of articles on the town meeting warrant, town meeting, will make a decision. But I just felt it important to try to synopsize and put what I saw as the only 2 rational options out there. So,
I think it's good, Rick. I think it's, you think it would be of any value to put the information supplied by Sam Joslin on the website? Or-
Definitely.
Because
Yeah.
like even this weekend, while I was reading this, good but depressing at the same time, that there are people, there was a huge Facebook conversation about why can't we have a coffee shop there or this or that. And people have all sorts of great ideas, but they just don't know the facts are not there.
Right. Yeah, one thing, so, you know, we've made some real progress with posting the packets, and there's a huge amount of information in there. And we're now, you know, not only doing that on a current basis, we've backfilled it, I think, as far as like July of 2020. So every select board open session packet for that time is online.
I
But
think this would get
there's not
lost
like an
the
in,
shuffle.
yeah, exactly. I wouldn't pretend that anyone's like combing through all that. What I would love to do, and when we get our staffing situation squared away, I would envision doing, I've met with different staff about this, is having like an index where it would say on, you know, whether it's the Middle Street Bridge or this project or a Page School or whatever, that it would say, you know, information on this topic is included in the following select board packets, and then hyperlink to each of those. Because as you know, once you get the packet, you can jump right to the content, because that's all hyperlinked from the agenda. But to basically give people like a, you know, roadmap to find what they're looking for, because there's a ton of content there. But someone would have to like sift through it, and we need to make it better accessible. But to do that for every one of the 70 initiatives we're doing, right now we don't have staff time. If we hadn't reassigned our assistant town clerk to be the COA director, you know, these are the things that like, so I'm the one who posted the packet because that was her job. So she's not there, so I did it. But those are the things that like the staffing, there's ideas that are way beyond what we're doing that is, I've had in my list for 3 years, but we haven't had the staff. But yeah, we're getting there once things settle out, we got our COA director. But just so you know, that's the level of service I want to get to, is that for those, some number of projects, hopefully not 75, but maybe for 10 or 15 or 20, that we every time we post a packet with content, that gets added to a corresponding webpage. You can imagine that takes a support staff person week in, week out, making those updates. And if you start doing it, then you don't follow through. It's almost worse than not doing it. So that's why I haven't wanted to like start it, because I've known we haven't had the staffing to provide that level of service week in and week out. So, but that is where I want to get to. So someone could go to the CarPost page, which, you know, right now we do it in fits and starts. You know, sometimes over the few years I've been here, I'll find time, I'll build out a Middle Street Bridge page, I'll populate it with a bunch of stuff. Then 6 months will go by. It's not like I'm not working on the Middle Street Bridge. We work on it several times a week, but we don't have time to be posting to the web. So I agree with what you say. And this, we could do this as a one-off, but bigger picture, that's where I would like to get to, is that there's like an index so people can harvest all this great information in these packets, because there's a ton of good info there.
So could you send out, do it by the email blast, just to say for information on this,
Mhm.
and then put a link in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, and maybe there's something coming out when we have that retreat on February 5th. I think if we collectively, and the board in particular, could say, these are the 8, 10, 12, 15 projects that warrant that level of effort, because it is a sustained level of staff time. I can't deliver that for 80 projects, where I need to have someone working, but if we can say, these are the short list projects, and we're going to provide this index, and we're going to maintain it on a current basis, that, once we get our staffing back to the clerk's office being fully staffed, we could do that. But until 4 months ago, we not only didn't have the bandwidth, we didn't have we only had a small number of people who were really conversant on the website, so we have people who can post agendas, but to really do good web pages, there's only a couple of us really that have those skills.
So, I don't know if anybody else had anything that they wanted to say about that. About this top, so this.
I think that's a good way to put both options on. That's where the voting is going to be.
Right.
So do we have all the information we need to provide the residents so that they can make a decision? Or, I mean, one of the things before the CPC was to authorize money to, evaluate the preservation restriction. I'm not sure we need to go forward with this. It's saying.
Yeah, in my opinion, at this point, that's throwing good money after that. That's my opinion.
I see it a little bit differently, respectfully. I do think that if that proposal is going to be a, sound, well thought out proposal, it would benefit from the work that was outlined in that scope. Because, we're not historic preservation experts, even though we might feel we have some sense of market conditions. We're not going to do the type of market discussion of, with prospective users, or what they might be, what might gain someone's interest or not. So I do think the work outlined in that scope would be helpful to bring a well-formulated proposal. The other thing is, when you read that proposal, it never included having a historic preservation restriction drafted at town meeting, just like you wouldn't have a conservation restriction drafted at town meeting. But what it would have included, or would include if we go forward, is a detailed list of what would be the performance objectives of such a restriction. And that's something that, the vendor could put together based on her extensive knowledge of how these deals are structured. So I think, if we're looking to bring forward a fully fleshed out proposal, I do think we should expend some funds on that. Big picture, I don't disagree with Rick's comment that it's maybe good money after bad, but I think it's, do you want to really flesh out the proposal, or do it conceptually? And if you do it conceptually and then it fails, some people may say, well, it wasn't given a fair shake.
The question on that is, again, another thing that complicates things is if we've made it too definitive, do we scare off anybody that might have some modicum of interest? I don't know. In other words, can it be negotiable? That's the thing.
Not really. And that there is a tipping point there of how far do you need to go for the voters to feel comfortable turning over this resource? Because, a number of people wouldn't want to vote to turn it over to a third party without some assurance that the preservation restriction is going to do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
But what's the tipping point where you go too far?
Just like if we're, who decides if we're turning that over to a third party, are we making, who are making the arbiters of what we want to what degree we don't want to change it? I guess that's my, that's a hard thing to draw that line. You know, if someone needs, well, we need to do this to make it livable. Then, and they come back, how's that give and take gonna work?
Yeah, no, I mean, you take an example of windows. You have to reconstruct the existing windows, or are you able to replace them with modern windows, but that would then impact the appearance.
Well, hopefully, the consultant will give us some options.
They would. That's where, if the consultant's involved, you know, these questions are going to come to you as the, you know, acting as the landowners, the select board, as you are the stewards on behalf of the public. Ultimately, it's up to the voters, and it could only be turned over for disposition with the voters' approval. You know, I think to ask that question in a serious way, many voters would be hesitant, if not unwilling, to even cast that vote if they're not given answers, real answers to the questions they're going to have.
You think so? Okay.
Well, you've been at this longer than I have, don't you think so?
Yeah, for people that really want to preserve the building, I think they're gonna.
They're gonna care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the question is, are those the people that are in vote, or other people that on the board? I think we need to provide the information on both options so that people can make it.
Yeah.
And I think to the other, you know, to the second point that, or the second potential proposal Rick outlines, there would be questions there. And I think you'd need to, you don't decide tonight, but you'd need to think through what kind of due diligence do you want to take place? Do you want to have, I don't think you would want to go so far as to like conceptually design something, because that would seem premature if that decision's not been made. But might you want to at least rough out what might a budget be for design, you know, construction, like orders of magnitude, even per square foot or something. You know, what might cost of building demolition and, you know, like what might that run? People will ask and say you can either have an answer or you cannot, but people will ask.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, Angus. Okay.
So is
Check
that
one
something,
out. Okay.
I mean, I know that's not.
I don't think the second one, I think the first one, Wayne, you know, I think he's penciled out some of that. I think the first one, I think we would look to, it would be very difficult for staff to have anything reliable on that one. I don't think we could, but on the second one, you know, he could probably get some numbers.
Wayne's idea he had some, I think he didn't have any numbers with it, but he had ideas of what would need to be done.
Yeah, numbers as well.
Yeah, he did have an estimate.
He had some preliminary numbers.
Oh, he
I just
did?
mean in
Oh.
terms of conceptually, like what the, you know, how the park would want it. You know, it's more
Well,
like-
see, yeah, I think that's getting ahead of ourselves, because I think that there should be a group of people, and I hate to say another committee, but there should be a committee comprised largely of veterans, who help in that design. I mean, we would need somebody who is a professional at design to do that, but we needed them to be able to take I think at least we need them to take the ideas presented to them by the people who have a deep interest in it. And so that in the end, the memorial represents.
The second thing you mean.
Right, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that would represent.
So that would be
What-
the language of the article to. I mean, I think if you just say to preserve the park, that doesn't give people enough, you know, real sense of what's going to happen. But if you say to hire a consultant to work with it, you.
Oh, okay, yeah, I mean, that's, sure, yeah, no, that's way more detailed than I was even considering. Yeah, you're right.
But if
You know,
we have
that's
one option
yeah.
that has a consultant proposal with
Yeah.
everything, and then we have the
Yeah.
other options, like 2 sentences, it's just kind of, you know, I think people want to feel like they're.
Yeah, but I don't think we want to be proposing a design
No,
at that point. Yeah, yeah.
No, but you might want to be proposing funding
end of the process.
Yeah, right, because it, if, I think the basis of when you started your remarks was kind of time is passing and a decision needs to be made, a direction has to be
Yeah.
set. So if a direction is set by a vote at town meeting, it would be great to not then lose 5 months before funding is appropriated to then go forward in that direction.
Yeah.
Because actually, funding would be needed either way. If the first option was what the voters supported, there would be some funding to turn this historic preservation objectives into a full historic preservation restriction, which is more of a 30-page legal document. Some legal costs, some consultant costs. So there would be some cost to execute that. Just like with the second, there would be some cost to execute that with both, demolition, site preparation, or just the design, the landscape architect.
So maybe the article could be for a design.
Yeah, they could potentially both have some funding attached to them. That would make it more tangible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bob, you have a deep interest in this.
I do.
What are your thoughts?
And just Bob, if you would, hey, either Adam or Jen or Stephanie, when Bob speaks from where he's sitting, can you hear him? And if not, we'll invite him to sit a little closer to the mic. But if you can hear him, that's great.
Yes, I can hear him.
Okay, good. Thanks. I just want to make sure. Thanks.
Okay. I've always thought, Rick, and I'll go along with part of what you were saying, is we've had committees in the past, but they've gone really nowhere. But I think we should have another committee, not necessarily of veterans, but I think there should be some veterans on it. There should be some people that want to see it preserved. There should be some people that maybe not want to, for a consensus of opinion of what to do with that building. Your comment about the windows, those windows are in better shape than any of even the windows in here. They're 122 years old. There's 2 pieces of glass on them, both in 2 windows. So those are in pristine condition and should be preserved. Taken out, redone, and all that. I have a few ideas in the back of my head. I'm not going to bother you with them tonight about what I think should happen. But I'd like to be on a committee that at least explores those options. Because I look at it this way, the town has voted at least 4 times to preserve that building. The most recently was at the fall town meeting last year when Mr. Burmeister proposed not doing anything with it until a use to be found, and the town voted it down. So to me, there are people out there that want to see that building preserved. Now, I know 1.5 million is extremely expensive, but maybe we can get our committee together. We might be able to come up with some way of either funding it or doing something else, or coming up with some use for it or something like that. I just think we need to try to do something, come up with something, because, like I said, most of the people, at least at town meeting, when they first voted the 1.5 million, it may have been by 1 vote, but it was 67% of the people in that room that wanted to save the building. So I think there's enough interest in there within the town to want to try to do something to preserve it. And I think we need to give a lot of people the chance to at least put their 2 cents worth in. And at least, come up with a committee to sit down and discuss the uses. Now that we know what the design flows can be, how much, you can do, all right, if they give you a big parameter in which to work. So I just think we ought to at least sit down, talk about it, and try to come up with some kind of use. And I think municipal use would be probably a better use for the building than anything. So, I mean, that's my opinion.
So Bob, how would that committee be different from the committees that we've had in the past?
I'm not sure it would, if to be honest with you. But I mean, if we get a few people together, sit down, and come up with some at least some tangible ideas of what to use the building for, And whether the consensus is to sell it to somebody privately, or they want to see CPA funds used to preserve it. I think people in town need to have that discussion of what to do with it. Not just the 4 or 5 of us together figuring that out. I think we should, a lot of people that had some interest in it. And I remember several years ago, I was every veteran in town. We had, I think, 77 of them at that time. And I just asked them what they thought about the use of the building. Like everything else, I get 10% return. But there wasn't one of them that wanted to see it torn down. So again, it needs to be a lot, you need to have a real serious discussion, I think, and a very honest discussion about what to do with the building. And I think there should be several people in town who would like to sit on the committee and talk about it.
So, not necessarily to stick with the idea that what I outlined. But if we went to town meeting, 2 articles. One was to sell the building, the nominal cost, or as outlined, would most likely end up being single-family home. The other, repurposing the site with a memorial. And the third option is sort of the unspoken option, which is neither of those are approved. And we go back to where we are right now. So what if there were a committee that had between now and town meeting to come up with the options that Bob was proposing might be out there?
Well, I would say if we're going to have a committee, which I think is a great idea.
Well, I'm not so sure it is, Bob, okay, because committees sometimes
I know,
get into
committees
anything
can run down to themselves, I understand that. But I think if we're going to go to the town and have the town decide, we have to have at least 2 clear proposals of what to do. It can't be, well, we think this and we think that, I think there should be, to preserve it, there should be a clear, understanding of what you're going to do with it, what's going to cost and all that kind of stuff. To sell it with a restriction on it, that also has to be very clear to go to the town meeting so that, both options are out there, both options are very clear, the voters know exactly what they're voting for. I mean, I obviously am in favor of saving it, but the town votes to do something different with it, then that's the town's vote, not mine. But I think if we go to town meeting with something, we need to go with the best options of both, start preserving it or selling it. But I think the taxpayers need to have a clear cut direction of which either one of them should go for. I think.
Yeah, I'm quite honestly a little frustrated that, we're now well over 2 years past the vote. And these uses that might be out there still haven't shown themselves. And makes me wonder if these uses exist.
Okay, then let me run a couple by you. I wasn't going to do that tonight, but one, obviously the one that I've been preaching for the past 3 or 4 years is the design purpose of that building was memorial to the veterans. I think it should still remain that way. Kevin Bone called me several months ago. He's on the cable advisory committee. And he came up with a proposal of possibly using the second floor as a studio, so that he could produce some of the videos and stuff like he did for the 200th anniversary, which I think is a fantastic thing. Second, or third, actually, eventually, the town is going to have to come up with another spot for a cemetery. Because 3 out of the 4 are getting full. And the town has to legally provide burial grounds for people in the town of Westwood. If we do that, then I would suggest very strongly that the town take it over, do that, and make a cemetery commission. And they can use part of the building would be a good spot for cemetery commission. Parks and Rec might be able to use one of the tours if it gets picked up as a meeting place or to keep some of their records and stuff like that. Not storage, but a place to hold meetings and maybe signups and stuff like that. Brian Richards, the buildings and grounds would like to take one of the, use that as an office.
But
So we don't have-
we're talking about like office space on Park Avenue at that rate. It's not, just routine office space at $1.5 million for such a small building. It's
Well,
just-
2.1 was the low bid, just to
Yeah,
be clear.
okay.
And we've already gone past that. We don't have the money to do what would have to be done to that building to be able to use it for those purposes. I mean, that was what the last 1.5 years was spent finding out. And so where are we gonna come up with, another
And that's
$800,000?
And that's a bid that's getting older by the
That's
minute.
right, yeah.
It's probably worse now, to be honest, yeah.
Well, you wanted some suggestions and I gave them to you. What you do with them is up to you. Everybody's been saying, well, what do we do with the building? I just gave you a few ideas.
Yeah.
What do you do with them? That's up to you guys.
It's not an easy decision for anyone.
No, it's not.
But it's something we have to make. We need to move forward. We can't, we're sort of sitting in purgatory right now. And at some point, we gotta go one way or the other.
I happened to notice it Sunday because I was parking right across from it. So Rockport has a GAR building, and it was when I was a kid, it was I believe it was a Methodist church. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it was. A small building right on the main street, not too big, but now it's right on the business district. Now it's a home, but it still has the plaque on it and so forth. So.
But that's the word, yeah. My guess is do they have town sewer?
In that part of town, they do,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's, it's,
I would say it's a small building like this one, maybe even smaller.
right, the circumstances are different,
The First Congregational Church at the other end of town is a private home.
right, yeah. Good building. Beautiful building. Okay, so I think we probably have to move. Well, thanks for the.
Okay, so just in terms of, so it sounds like, the board's generally favorable toward the idea of 2 potential proposals. And, some due diligence toward each one and potentially some funding attached to each one. Because if that's, because that gives me the direction I'm looking for to so,
That sounds right.
okay.
Sam, thank you for all your work on this. It's really helpful.
Not a problem. And if at any time anyone has questions, feel free to give me a shout.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Where went all the apple juice from the cider? You have to pump it an awful lot.
Throw some raisins in it, let it get hard and sell it.
Make all your
Thank you.
Okay, so next item is the request to establish a new Whetstone Greenway gift account and accept contribution of funds. So the Whetstone Greenway, which runs between Sullivan's Court Extension and River Meadow Drive, has a gift has been offered at $10,000 from the developer of the small subdivision on the Sullivan's Court end of that. And we need to create an account, a gift account for that. And then we need to accept the gift of $10,000 offered by the developer, Thomas. Is it Navy or Navy?
Navy.
Is that misspelled right there? It says.
Oh, that is misspelled.
Okay.
Yes.
If
I could, Rick, you don't need to do anything. Just to be clear, you don't need to do anything. What's been put in front of you and suggested is, no. There's, as you know, there's a long history on this one. And this amount was initially held in escrow by the planning board. That's where it sits actually right now. And so the idea is that if it's contributed and accepted under the 4453A gift account, that vests in the select board the authority to then authorize this expenditure. So because as long as it's in an escrow account, that can't be actually expended until you go through the lengthy process of declaring that there was a failure to complete the agreed work and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a procedural. I do think in working with Leah and with town council over actually an extended period of time on this, I do recommend this. I do think this is the right way to unlock this money to put it to use, but you don't need to do anything.
So we don't actually need to go to.
If you want to use the money the way I'm outlining, you have to, but I just didn't want to, I know there's a lot of history on this one.
Yeah.
And so.
So what would we not do?
I don't know. I think you should do it.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah. I just, there's a lot of, there was definitely, it was initially not only envisioned, but conditioned as part of the subdivision approval. I know you know all this, Rick, but it was conditioned that this trail be put in as part of the development. And so I think there's some sentiment that the developer should have done it and, so on and so forth.
But this is where we are now, and the developer's not going to do it, and we have the opportunity to take the $10,000.
Exactly.
And use it combined with town funds to get the job done. So
that's right. And this may be beyond the scope, but Brad Bashore has indicated to me he does not think that the 30,000 of CPC plus the 10,000 will be enough. He does think there will be supplemental funding needed. So I don't think that should affect your vote, because I think having the funds available for the use is a good thing regardless. But just so you know, I don't have a number, but he has indicated that he doesn't think the 40,000 would be enough. I don't know, Wendy, if he's shared any more detail with you.
Well, it's a pretty short trail.
yeah, I think it's cost of materials. I think that's the killer, is that when the original, I may be wrong, but my impression is that the original estimate was based on then cost of materials as fresh treated lumber, and fresh treated lumber costs a lot more than it used to just 2 years ago.
So will this gift be tied to that use?
So I came up with this language. This is the form of when the board has created gift accounts in the last couple of years. This is the form of motion. But this language, that I put in, design, permitting, construction, a trail connecting Sullivan's Court, River Meadow. That is the purpose for which it's gifted, and you do need to use it for the purpose it's gifted. So yeah, I guess that is, you are limited to that. I was gonna say, maybe it could be done more broadly, but it has to be, if the town accepts gifts, whether from this person or that person or someone else, you have to only use it for the purpose for which it was gifted. So he's outlined in his letter those purposes, which is, pretty much paraphrased.
Okay, but the reason I'm asking if it is more expensive
And you decide you don't want to go forward,
yeah.
it would sit there for some amount of time. And at that point, and I did deal with this in Westford, because they had some gift accounts that have been hanging on the books for years. If you really need to, you can go back to the source of the gift and they can change what, they can in writing change the purpose and you can revote it. It's kind of a rigmarole, but there is a way to do that.
Is it worth trying to do that now, to say this or any other trail or something like that?
If it was up to, a couple of years ago when we were first working on this, I remember telling Leah, and this is actually, we were talking about the soldiers and sailors. And I said, Leah, I think we might need a pedestrian activated blinker to get people safely across Main Street. And from where I sit, that I think personally would be a higher priority. That ship has sailed. The planning board voted what they voted, which was a requirement that he contribute the funds. That's now in their, amended certificate of action that was approved in the fall of 2020, I think, fall of 2020. So he is required to contribute the funds.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel fairly strongly that this one where it can't be that much more.
Yeah. The other point, I'm sorry, Rick, to interrupt, but the other point I meant to make, and I started to forget, but is important. A CPC proposal was submitted, citing this 10,000 as matching funds. At the time, I do know I made everyone aware, it's not like this money's sitting in the bank there. It's procedurally, I knew some things were still going to need to happen. But I think that if we're all working together as a town, and we want to work together, this Whetstone Greenway project is relying on this 10,000. So I think to do anything other than that would kind of tip over the apple cart.
No, I wasn't suggesting that unless this could not be built.
Right.
around it.
Yeah.
And then just that way, it would go towards a comparable trail or some other trail use, which would satisfy the intent.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to go back.
There's a design, this Conservation Commission has approved, is that correct?
I think he was up there tonight talking.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's at the conceptual design stage, I think is right. So it's not a final design.
All right, it was just a thought, so we don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish the planning board hadn't amended their permit to require this, because that just is yet another thing that would need to be untangled. If the project ever didn't go forward. It's a very logical place for a pedestrian connection, whether sooner or later. It's a very logical.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I can't believe how ridiculously expensive it is, but a couple of pallets would be fine.
Yeah, and I'll give you, personal advice, don't try to ride your bike, you're skinny tires.
No, we go the other way.
Yeah, the big cost driver was once, I was hired, Sam was on board with the ADA, and that is correct. And it's not a nature trail. It is treated under ADA more as a sidewalk because it's like a access from point A to point B. That's what made that higher standard.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a nature trail. It's like actually a pedestrian route, kind of like a sidewalk. So that's why it had to meet ADA. That's what drove the cost. That wasn't a popular opinion, but it was the correct opinion.
It's more tree. You should have explained that a long time ago.
It took a little while to get my head around it, working with Sam. And, but yeah, once we had our head around it, I do think we explained it, but I think that was probably the last time this was before this board. I want to say was in fact, I could tell you almost for sure. It was, I want to say it was like January of 2019 when you were asked to authorize construction within the portion of the trail that is under the care and custody of the select board. And you voted to authorize that subject to it meeting ADA. That was on my advice and Sam's advice because we knew that that was required. But that was the last time I believe that this has been actually formally before the select board. And I don't think we weren't as articulate about it as we became in the subsequent, 6 or 8, 10 months of meetings.
Okay, I move to establish the Whetstone Greenway gift account in accordance with provisions of MGL law chapter 44, section 53A.
And it is, and,
Well, you have to do one at a time.
okay, all right. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I move to accept the gift funds for said West Newbury Greenway gift account and authorize the expenditures of such funds in support of the design, permitting, and construction of all, and all of the costs pertaining to the establishment of the trail connecting Sullivan's Court to River Meadow Drive.
All in favor? Aye.
Great, that's great. There's been it's taken a lot of thought to
Boy,
try to
there's been a
unravel
lot
this. Yeah.
A lot of work on.
Yeah.
Like
Probably cost $10,000 to get the $10,000.
I think they built the big gig with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good, thank you.
thanks. Okay, we got a update regarding the consideration of public versus COVID-19 self-tests.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, there was kind of a lot of info in the packet, but not a clear request. I was hoping to get to like a clear request that we want to purchase X number of kits for use. It sounds like by staff was the thing that, actually, let me just rewind. So we went to the Board of Health meeting last week. The decision was made and everybody agreed that it didn't make sense to go forward with some large purchase of like half a pallet, for the primary reason being that the rules changed with the federal requirement that insurance now covers 8 tests per person or per household. I think per person per month. So it's basically, people can get tests for free.
Except,
Or if they have
but
insurance.
when?
Well,
They're not available. These are available.
From what Paul said, he checked with several. Yeah, do I remember that correctly, Angus?
yeah, there were some, until you place the order, you can't get an assurance of when it's going to get shipped. And so Paul talked to different manufacturers and distributors and got quoted different prices. But yeah, they wouldn't lock in either a price or a delivery date until you actually, make an order. So he didn't get that far because,
The other towns have received them, right?
well, there was the initial distribution for towns that had met certain, I think, socioeconomic, but this is different. So I don't know if anyone's received them under this more recent allocation. I don't know that they haven't. I don't know one way or the other.
See, I think, I'm gonna be like, this money is not a big chunk of ARPA money that we have, it's sitting there, it's designed to help the community related to the COVID problem. The 678 households in town, and so we could, and say just to pick a, I don't know exactly how many public safety employees there are in the total town employees, but my feeling is that every household gets 1 pack and employees get 2 packs. That's the, and to see where we don't know what the money, but we have this money, we're not using. I don't think that the average person is gonna be able to go to their insurance company. Yeah, insurance covers it, but you can't get them. And if the town has a lead on getting these of 2 months that are not, where they're not available for public, just regular public purchase and then reimbursement by an insurance company, we're actually doing something vital in terms of actually helping people, helping a kid get back to school because they're negative, or someone go to work, or an employee of the town that they've got the sniffles, but they don't know if they have COVID or not. To me, it's 30,000 to every household in the town at least gets 1 pack, which is 2 tests. There might be a lot more. I was figuring it on approximate, the median of the prices of $15 for a pack. So I don't know, but that's just one person's thought.
So
I don't think it's a bad idea to do it, that's all.
I have a couple questions. When you said there's 678.
No, 16.
Okay.
That's what I got,
That's fine, I can work,
Okay.
I can live with that number, okay. Just have you clarify that. Let me see, the numbers worked out when we were at the Board of Health meeting the other night, that it was, about, $4,000 for 232 kits, if I remember correctly. So, if you don't have to.
I do, yeah, I have my notes here, and yeah, I mean, if you want, I just have about a page of, I'll just read you my notes. Okay. Paul, state gave kits to 102 communities. They had to decide who got test kits. Governor pushing for testing. A dozen residents have contacted me about test kits. There's 4 vendors. State has done the legwork, could buy from manufacturer or distributor. He said a pallet, which is 15,120 kits, is about $75,000. He said that's the cheapest price, and he'd done some research. So with the select board authorizing up to 30K, we're short of half a pallet. Another company offered a case of 232 kits. That was the minimum. Let's see, I think it's a minimum purchase. I think he was saying you'd need 3,480 kits at a cost of $66,000. He contacted distributors. They wouldn't give a price.
That would be 2 kits a household, basically.
Yeah. Test kits have to be distributed in pairs of 2. Tom Fahey said the intention of the tests are to take 2 tests within 24 hours because the antigens may not appear for up to 4 days. Tom said, what is the need for tests? It should be need-based. He talked about seniors. He said Tom Fahey felt the majority of the community has the means. I did refer to staff need, and I asked one of the part-time staff who happened to be in attendance whether that individual felt that the recent insurance coverage was was sufficiently covered staff needs. We're just one opinion, but I think that person felt that insurance coverage was good and sufficient. Tom said if we do it, we need to go quickly because Omicron, we could be into the next variant. So I don't have a lot of notes, but that's what I have. And then at the end, I just wrote $19 times 232. So I think that, that is $19 per kit or
It was 232 in a
per
carton,
kit,
232 kits in a carton, and that was the price of the kit, $19 or whatever. So we could buy in smaller options. I mean, my personal opinion is that the kit supplied. My understanding is that there's supposed to be kits mailed to every household in the U.S.
Jim just pulled up a site.
So you actually have to request it.
You do.
You have to type in your name,
Okay.
your address, your
Okay.
email, and they forward it to you.
Okay.
But they're estimating within
within,
7 to 10 days.
7 to 10 days it'll be delivered to you.
Yeah.
And it's 4 kits.
Yeah, okay.
So
And that
we
starts
can
tomorrow.
put that information, it started today, I signed up myself.
Oh, I thought it started.
No, so we can put that on the website tomorrow.
Yep, okay.
And anyone who needs help requesting a kit can have it sent to them. Anyone in town hall who picks up the phone can type in their name, their email, their address.
Yeah.
And have it sent to the individual in town. So getting kits to people isn't as hard as it used to be. I think just because there was a backlog of everyone rushed the stores and got their
Right, right.
kits.
But my impression is, and this is only a somewhat informed impression, but my impression is that kits are available now at stores.
At the very least, you can have one sent to yourself. 7 to 10
Right,
days.
right, yeah, but, in terms of the 8 per month per individual from, being paid for by insurance companies. I think there are kits available now. Now, I could be proven wrong, but that's my impression from what I've seen. But I see a little snapshot, so. So I don't, personally, I don't see the point in the town spending ARPA funds on it right now. I think they could end up being a liability for us because we might end up with kits with not enough takers, and the kits then have to be stored. And at some point, they expire. According to, what Tom Petty said, Tom is a pharmacist. And, Tom said, well, the antigens have a limited life. So I don't know what the lifespan is on a kit. I don't know if it's 6 months, 12 months. It's, probably not years.
Oh, it's probably not, that would be long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, I personally think that there's a higher probability that kids end up being a liability to the town than that they be a benefit. Okay.
One of the logistical questions that came up is, let's say the policy was, 2 sets of kits per household, for instance. We don't have a reliable list of every household. That's something that Jim's office recently sent out, the street list census, and that, I guess, hadn't been done for a while.
For a while. Let's just put it that way.
So it's not like that we're sitting here today in possession of a accurate census. Hopefully in a matter of a couple of months or weeks, we will have that, but it's, we don't have that. And so one of the things we talked about at Board of Health briefly is, let's say that was the policy. So we're setting aside, 2 kits for Mr. and Mrs. Jones on Main Street, but they never show up. At what point, is it 10 days or 15 days? At what point do you say, okay, they've lost their allocation, we're going to give it to Mr. and Mrs. Smith? And then maybe, like those kinds of things would need to be sorted through, in addition to how do you communicate that to residents? Which office would be responsible for keeping inventory, giving them out, what hours? It would be a big undertaking. So.
The timing on this just seems really strange that, there's this big push from the state and then the federal government is making them available to everybody.
Yeah, it is a bizarre coincidence.
Yeah.
But I think it really is just that,
No, I'm sure it is. It just makes it difficult to make
Right,
decisions,
right.
I think it was more of a miscommunication in the sense of the state didn't know
What was coming.
what was coming. The federal government was like, hey, everyone's gonna get these now.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we rescind $30,000 that we allocated for kits at this point?
Yeah, I think we should if we don't have the Board of Health support. We're
Right,
counting on them
right.
to establish policies.
Well, and even you saw the note I sent out, if I'd gotten anything back saying, hey, we recommend 500 kits for this purpose, something. I don't know if you want to rescind it tonight or we keep this alive for another couple of weeks, but I was looking for, somebody to offer something tangible that could be a specific vote, that would have some rationale behind it.
We just wait and see how the federal rollout works.
Sure, that's not so.
Yeah.
At some point, we do want, if we don't use the funds for this purpose, at some point, we do want to rescind that so that they become available. Not that, Not that we're gonna go through the 700,000 plus.
It's not going anywhere.
But it will, and we did touch on that a little bit, and we'll talk about it later on tonight's agenda, but there are, some uses, for instance, water piping at Page
I
School.
know, but this is 30,000 out of 700,000. We can rescind this 6 months from now.
Yes, it's not gonna delay any
It's not
decisions,
burning
no.
a hole in our pocket.
No, it's not.
We don't know what's gonna happen. Everything could go away 3 days from now, or in June, there could be.
Could be variant gazelle.
Yeah. We should be using the Cyrillic alphabet.
Okay, so we'll kind of table that. I think that's good. All right. Okay, and E, this was another one where just kind of threw a lot of content in there and including the additional information yesterday, but so Rick, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So there is, through the MVP program, there's an action grant program, and it is recommended but not required that a letter of intent with the description of projects that are envisioned the town would like to to pursue, or grant projects that the town would like to pursue, be submitted to the MVP program for initial comment before actually applying for the grant. And the grant, I believe it's late February, I should recall the time frame, but I think it's late February or early March that the grant, RFR, I guess, when you can begin to submit for grants. And that goes through probably into May, I'm guessing. So it would be good for us to submit a letter of intent with, with grants that are considered for being pursued. In those grants, one of them is evaluating the risks and looking for means of mitigation for River Road, for the erosion and flooding issues along River Road. Trying to address the problem before it becomes a minor calamity. And that's going to be a multi-year effort. This would be a start. There also is discussion of addressing some issues relative to native plants and addressing, at the same time addressing invasives in some specific areas. And, I'll be honest, although I've read through this, I'm losing detail right now because I've been reading too much material. But, there are discrete areas that are being considered for that effort. And then the third was more general, looking at stormwater drainage in town. And I know Angus has caught your eye, and I'm kind of curious. I'd like to hear more about the conversation. You said you had a conversation with Wayne sometime back, and I'd like to hear more about that. But that would be another area for for grant application. And there can be multiple areas that we apply for grant funds in. We could considerably be awarded money for all of them. I don't recall what the limitation is for grant amounts, but it's a pretty good sized number. So we don't need to be shy about applying for what we think might be done. And probably important that it be broken down, be sort of granularized as much as possible, so that if the MVP action grant program likes part of your proposal, but not the entire thing, they don't reject the entire thing. So they might, potentially reject some parts, but overlook others. So the plan is to submit the letter of intent by next Monday. And, with sort of all final information together by the climate change resiliency committee by this Friday. And it doesn't, the submittal of the letter of intent is not a commitment by the town, so it doesn't, because it's not committing the town financially in any way, it doesn't require select board approval beforehand, but it's important that, to know that it's going on in the background. And if it does get to the point of actually applying for a grant, then it requires this board's approval.
And when is the grant application?
It's, I think it's the beginning of the period, I believe is early March. I don't recall the exact date. Because dates, just in the last few days, they moved dates around.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Page 31.
Okay,
Angus is number 31. I don't know where it is.
yeah, okay. Well, you still have those on 29, so it's easy to get to.
Oh, okay, maybe I'm reading wrong, but the bullet point that starts with aligning,
Yeah,
we don't qualify for that.
let me see what came before that. That's where you're heading for that. No, we don't, yeah, those letters, you got individuals and happening income, non-CE, income. Yeah, so we don't.
We're way above.
Yeah, that particular one, that's, I think there's a, there's a.
Does that apply to, is that a special part of the grant?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, no, that's sort of a, a sub-element for, for, I think really small communities that, are,
Maybe like
Economically
communities off
challenged.
the Cape and stuff like that.
what was it, Jim?
That'd be like the communities off the Cape, like the islands and things like that.
Or probably some communities way out western Mass.
Okay.
Rick, do you want me to say a little bit about
Yeah,
this?
please. Thanks.
So, and I am in no way trying to put my thumb on the scale. I think everything in there is meritorious without question. But as you said, Rick, the issue of the building up a more robust mapping of the stormwater infrastructure definitely caught my eye because, when I'm looking at grants, I'm often looking at what are things that we will probably need to pay for anyway.
Yep.
And so if we can get a grant, we're actually avoiding local costs. So I put a couple of things up on the screen and I'll do a screen share so I can, so people from home can see what I'm talking about. So this is linked, what you see here is linked from the town webpage from the DPW site. This is a map. Actually, let me just back up before I go into all this. So the issue of mapping stormwater infrastructure, we do not have a good base map. We do not have a good consolidated understanding of the whole stormwater infrastructure, pipe sizes and catch basins and, diameters and inverts and all of those things. And we would like to do that. We would like to have that. And so, for instance, Wayne and I have we're on a Zoom meeting a week from Thursday for a culvert replacement grant that we've had our eye on. It looks really interesting, but sitting here today, we don't really have the objective basis to say that culvert X is our top priority. We just don't have that level of documented understanding of our stormwater infrastructure. So I want to share with you what we do have. One of the requirements in year one of our MS4 permit, which was FY19, was that we produce a map of all of the outfalls of our stormwater system everywhere our stormwater enters into so-called waters of the US, which is what's protected under the MS4 permit. So this map shows you kind of a drain line. A catch basin is this green symbol. It shows you with these arrows the direction of flow, but that's it. It doesn't show you diameter. It doesn't show you anything about the catch basins. And this was done, this was done, I want to say in September of 2018. I was on the job for 2 months at that point. Gary Bill had already announced his retirement. He told me, he's like, we did the best we could. We gave MVPC the best information we had, but it wasn't much. A lot of it was based on his anecdotal description. It wasn't based on like as-built plans, because a lot of the developments were built before, before there were good records kept in the town. Even this more modern subdivisions, it's, some towns I've worked in that have an engineering department. Every time there's an approved subdivision, those as-built go into a, flat file, and the town engineer can like pull out, oh, here's the as-built for such and such. We don't have that kind of record keeping system. It's gotten a lot better in the last couple of years, but we don't have that. So we have, in my opinion, and Wayne agrees, is a pretty superficial understanding of our stormwater system. I want to show you sorry, these things keep opening. So this is what we had in my last job. People are tired of hearing my last job, but we didn't inherit this, we built this. So this is from our online GIS system. So I just turned on, utility infrastructure map, drainage group. And you can see within that, all of these different features: catch basins, outfalls, ditches, drainage lines, catch basins, outfalls, or Mass DOT, or Main DOT, I should say, relative to local. You can click on any of these features. That's the line. It's the catch basins that are more interesting. Let me get it to see one of those. It keeps clicking on the line. Hold on, let me zoom in a little bit. Why does it keep? Maybe because turn off the lines. I just had one a minute ago. I was there. Okay, catch basin. This shows you, is there a sump? Is there a hooded sump on the catch basin? That's a really important feature from like a stormwater management standpoint. The water condition, the flow. There's let's just for kicks.
That's like reading the box scores. That's so much fun.
It's well, okay. So I don't have to log in, but there's photos. There's this was 2015 was when I started there. We had a serious stormwater program in Hamden. We had, resources, we had staff, we had consultants, we had interns. We had a really robust understanding of our stormwater system. And that was built with investment. And so I see, that GEI scope that Rick got last spring. I shared that with Wayne, and we were both like drooling over it, because like that would be really helpful information to us. And I know it might seem like really dry, but people may assume we already have that. We don't have that understanding. And so whether we get a grant for it or whether we pursue funding at some point through some local appropriation, it's a lot of money. I think it was 180 to 220 or something, a lot of money. But that's where me and Wayne would like to get to, not to say this grant round, but like to get to where we need to get to. Because I asked Wayne today, like when, as you know, the MS4 is a 5-year permit. We're in year 4, but then after year 5, there's going to be a new 5-year permit with each year new requirements. I asked him, like, when are we going to be required to do this? Because I'm pretty sure in Hamden, we probably weren't doing this because we thought it was a great idea. We probably did it because we were required to under our MS4. We were definitely several years ahead up there than Massachusetts is on the MS4, because some of the things we're doing up there with O&M plans we're not there yet here in Massachusetts. But he wasn't sure. We could look into that, but he said, look, even if it's year 10, we're in year 4 now. Year 10 is going to be here like that. So sooner or later, we need to invest to actually just understand our current system so we can make informed decisions about infrastructure or other grant opportunities. So I'll say again, I'm not looking to put my thumb on the scale. I think all the initiatives are very meritorious. But this is one that kind of jumped off the page as being like, oh, that would be really helpful in actually managing the infrastructure.
And so wouldn't some of this information be needed, for example, to assess River Road and?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it on more of a, you know, discrete geographic basis.
Yeah, so the river road, this is part of the scope of what's proposed for River Road.
Okay, so it's just expanding the town.
Yeah. But yeah, if you ever, it's Hamden's online GIS is unbelievable. We had a full-time GIS IT person on staff. So we for a town of 7,400 people, I mean, we had serious, I mean, it was unbelievable.
Can you link water quality data to that catch basin?
You probably can, you know, that goes beyond, you know, it's been a couple of years, but
You know, water quality in terms of like sediment load.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
but yeah, and if you did click on like the drain line as opposed to the catch basin, I think it's actually not telling you that, but I think within the data, I know within the data is the diameter, what's the invert elevation and the, you know, what's the outflow elevation, all this stuff. It gave, you know, it gave the town, you know, just a tremendous basis to make strategic investments and to prioritize things. And one thing that you may or may not know, but, you know, Wayne has to report annually on the amount of material that's gathered from catch basins. So we actually have to keep track which catch basins are accumulating siltation and which aren't. So, because that helps to understand where erosion's coming from and all of that. So I know when we were building this out a few years ago, their vision for it, I don't know if it's carried forward, it probably has, is that they would actually track, like, not just like the, you know, but when they did spot checks and when they would do the measuring how much silt was in the catch basin, that the GIS was like a repository for all that information, because it was all linked to like these detailed records.
So would this just be in the MS4 area that you would propose this or townwide?
The requirement is just for the MS4. You know, we talked about that with, and I can't remember, you know, who was part of what, but when we did the River Road, well, when we talked about the stormwater bylaw, I think we went townwide.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the GEI scope? Was that townwide?
I think it was focused on River Road, but there was an option of, they asked me, do I want to consider it townwide? And you're going to cringe at this, but at that point I said no, because that was not in the scope.
Yeah.
that we were considered at the MVP, where this, you know, climate resiliency committee, climate change was pursuing.
Mhm.
And it, you know, I was trying not to,
I think that's a great place to prioritize. I think River Road is an enormously tangible, you know.
but
I
if we
think,
can do it on a larger scale, that'd be great too.
oh, Nancy's on.
And I think,
Hi. Yeah, Wayne, this is Angus, this is really helpful. So I think we can include something like this in the letter of intent, and we can follow up with GI. I think Rick is right. The cover assessment that proposal they gave us was just for that section of River Road. So that 10 to 20K is just for that section. But
yeah,
I also
they had asked, yeah, they had asked, you know, did we want them to extend out to a wider area, to townwide? And I could probably dig up those emails, and they said, no, I don't think that makes sense at this time.
Yeah, the other thing, I think we can put a placeholder in there and see what the MVP folks think about this concept. We are also in discussions with Merrimack River Watershed Council, who is very excited to help us any way we want. And they're very well versed in mapping and water quality and stormwater issues. They've helped a couple of towns upstream, including Methuen and Tewksbury and Lawrence, do all this, and they've developed story maps for them. So they seem to have a lot of expertise, and they actually have an entire staff that is just helping towns with their MVP grants. And I think I heard that they recently got some state funding for stormwater stuff. So they when I talked to them, they mentioned that they may be able to supplement our grants with funding that they have. So we can kind of compare what GI is proposing with what the Merrimack River Watershed Council can do for us and get some costs and then decide for the final grant how we want to kind of mix and match.
So, Nancy, somehow we need to get that together, ideally, for the letter of intent, which we plan to submit next Monday.
Yeah, I think we have enough to talk about it in general for the letter of intent. So I think what Angus just said and the proposals we do have and the conversations we have with the council, we have enough to just put that in as an item. And then we'll have time from when we talk to them to the MVP to when the full proposal is due. And I remember last year, we only had like 3 weeks from when we talked to them to when the proposal is due. It was a very short turnaround from when they actually released the full grant to when they were due. But we'll have that time to develop the more detailed budget and task items and run that through, Wayne and the select board and Angus.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we could really go to GEI anytime and ask for an update of their proposal from last year, because I'm sure they need to refresh that. And do we want to revise it? Okay. Well, Angus, sounds like, based on this conversation, we'll add that to the letter of intent, to the scope of the letter of intent. And then see what we get for feedback.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like I heard from someone, and Nancy, I'm not sure if it was you or if it was Wayne or if maybe it was on last Wednesday's meeting, but there was some suggestion. I thought I heard that maybe the grant administrators in Boston are a little tired of hearing about stormwater projects. Is that?
Well, I had mentioned that to you.
Okay.
That was what Lisa had been told last year.
Okay.
But I don't recall the exact context of that. Do you, Nancy?
Yeah, so what they said was that they were getting lots of these very generic proposals from consultants for town-wide culvert assessments without really kind of a reason for why they're doing it. I think it's okay if you could articulate, and I think Angus actually kind of articulated that if that's where we want to go, but there's a need for it, if you can articulate the needs, I think that's okay. It was that they mentioned they were just getting these proposals that were written by consultants and not really by the towns. And they all looked very similar to them. You can like substitute one town for another, and they didn't really see the tie to how the town was actually going to use the information. So I think that was the issue was, they were looking for something new, obviously, and something innovative. But I think if we can make that argument that we really need this information for the decisions that the town staff needs to make or for meeting MS4 requirements, that's a very strong argument for us to do it.
Great.
In the meantime, I did tell Wayne to make sure that he talks to Gary to make sure that we've fully harvested his institutional memory, because he does have a lot of knowledge. We just don't have the documentation. So he may be able to say, these are your top 3 culvert issues in the town. And if so, that may be enough for us to run with this, culvert replacement grant we're applying for next Thursday. So, or not applying for it, we're going to a Zoom session to learn more about. But I think bigger picture and longer term, getting to where we have a comprehensive, like quality, map of our infrastructure, would be a real plus.
Okay.
And to that point, Angus, I think one of the things that the committee considered was that, the constraint of the town staff to take additional tasks on. So one of the things we looked into was finding consultants that can help with some of that, including recording some of that, historical knowledge from, past staff. So that is something that we could put into the grant if it's important enough.
That's great.
Okay, anybody have any other questions?
Just, Rick, take a look at page 69. It's basically that the consultants, proposed,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
fee structure.
Yeah.
It seems a little high if you look at what their tasks are, what they're charging for them. I don't know, maybe I'm off base, but like, especially task number 1, community outreach, and you see what they're actually doing for 15,000, it looks a little, linking a few pamphlets and having a media for 15,000 seems, but whatever, if it's going to be paid by the state, then.
Yeah, I guess I can't really comment on that. I mean, I don't know what's involved in the process, their community engagement process, and,
It sounds like what we did for the MVP workshop. Right?
Yeah.
They interviewed everybody.
And, we can select references if we want to. When it actually comes down to a point for grant.
Right, this is, I know, I'm just, it's just to decide, that's all.
All right. Yeah, that was a pretty good range there, too. And it's real money. All right,
Okay, no, okay.
So now on to ARPA funds.
yeah,
So I put just the briefest of memos, this is page 64 of your packet. Not looking for any big revelations, just want to try to keep it on the, keep it on the agenda. This is a half dozen potential uses that we're chewing on, to some degree. The Page School water lines, I know we talked about that a little bit earlier tonight and at a recent meeting. We have been part of a process the last month or so with Pentucket and Fitzmyer and Tachi, which is a vendor that, specializes in like civil engineering. I don't know exactly, you probably know, but anyhow, building engineering. And we've been looking at this so-called SWIG grant, which is a pretty attractive grant to replace drinking water bubblers in schools. But the sense is, and this is, a couple of Zoom meetings with Pentucket and with the administrators in the other 2 towns, is that without knowing what's in the walls and behind the walls and the piping, it would seem premature to see about swapping out fixtures without really understanding what the lines are, because we do think there are some issues where some water lines within the walls would need to be replaced. So we have invited Fitzmyer and Tachi to give us a proposal for that diagnostic work. So I don't have that tonight, but I will have that. And once I do, once, Wayne and I and Pentucket thinks it's in good shape, they are going to conduct, they're going to propose something which I'll bring to you guys to see if you want to appropriate ARPA funds for the evaluation of the Page School pipe replacement and what would be needed to basically bring the drinking water in line with the state water quality standards.
so.
And just to be clear, it meets all the federal standards today.
But not the state standard.
Correct.
So I have a sort of a basic question. So currently the water fountains are not being used. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I don't think that, I don't think that, some of them may not be, but some of, I think they have to be,
Some of them
Yeah.
are being used, but they meet this federal standard, but not state.
correct.
So, I mean, I have no idea what kind of numbers we're gonna be looking at here. But, you know, if it's a serious amount of the ARPA funds, you know, I don't know, you know, there's been discussion of sort of doing a thorough look at Page School in terms of capital needs and what that school is really going to cost over the course of the next decade or so. And, you know, we could use bottled water. Or maybe we couldn't. You know, I don't really know if that's a possibility or not. You know, but if it's going to use, you know, $50,000 worth of ARPA funds to do the plumbing in Page School,
That would touch it.
Yeah, we would.
I was trying to be generous.
So
So,
probably 50,000 to investigate, which is.
yeah, okay. You know, maybe there's another alternative, which is not what you would normally like to look at as a long-term alternative, but maybe it's a better choice. And that school has some serious problems.
And do we, Angus, do we even know, I'm sure there's a record, but so much was because of the flood, a lot of plumbing that was bad got monkeyed around with it, and some of it got replaced. That I do know that. So during the flood, so that has to be factored in too. Maybe it actually isn't as bad as the flood.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the problems.
I guess I just think we
No,
gotta
it's-
think about that as an option, but I hear what you're saying.
No, but your point is a good one. It's like fixing the you know, putting in brand new wiper motors on a car that may be useless.
Sounds like you've been there.
I always do that. I had a lot of British cars.
Lucas Electrical System.
Yeah.
So just some of these others on the list, I think a big philosophical question for the board as the kind of holder of the purse strings on the ARPA is whether you want to expend funds, and if so, what amount or what proportion of the total pot toward water main projects. If we find those are eligible, and I'm not totally convinced that they are, because I just haven't had time to fully digest the
Well,
rule.
there's an overview. I thought it was.
It seems like they
It
are.
seems like it.
But it's
It seems
all,
like-
you know, but there's verbiage in there about as long as it meets X, Y, or Z. And
Okay.
so I just, you know, I don't want to
Okay.
say it is until we know that it, you know, that it's, you know.
I want to know what the specifics are of the plan, and like what does the water department really want to do, instead of just saying, well, we need to do this. I'd like to know exactly what they have in mind.
Well, again, I mean, that's being proposed, that is, will be a town meeting.
Yeah, but they must have talked to Angus about it.
So, yeah, we met last Monday and they're working to retool the, you know, pipe, the water main replacement program to build in some more specific dates or years.
But that doesn't tell us anything.
You know, we do know they're in the engineering stage right now for the, is it Church of Prospect lines. And the latest numbers we saw suggest that the construction costs for those combined would be over $2 million. That's anticipated to be brought to the fall town meeting, not this spring, because it's not going to be far enough along with engineering. But that's just, you know, that's just the next project on the list. Mike Couttet just in the last week did send me an updated cost estimate on the overall water main replacement. And let me see if I can pull that out of my system.
Is there everything aggregated, all projects?
All the water main.
All none.
Yeah, it's basically the same spreadsheet you've seen before, but he applied. I showed you a hard copy, Rick. Remember, wasn't it like, it used to be 8 point something, it was 12 point something, just that, I'm pretty sure. He must have just given me a hard copy because it's not in the inbox, but yeah, I think they could be invited to present. I think they'd be very happy to present to the board of the updated kind of the water main. I will tell you, if you don't know, the capital program does have a nice map, which I think is pretty cool. Showing all of this is one's out of date, but nothing's changed on the locations. So if you pull this up, you can at least see, so everything shaded in blue is a water project. So this, oh, I'm not doing a share screen, sorry. Yeah, so this is in the capital program on the website. There's a map showing everything that was in the capital program. This is as of last September, like a year ago. So this needs to all be updated. That's the thing I said about you build something, you gotta like put a huge effort to build it, but we haven't had time to maintain it. But this shows all the water main improvements. So all of these locations correspond to specific projects in the capital program. So at least in terms of the geographic scope, I'm visual. I think a lot of people are visual, and we wanted to have something you could point to show people the main replacements. So for instance,
While you have that one up, it's interesting to go over there to the purple. And the purple is all pink scroll.
yeah. Just because it's a different category in the capital program, Yeah. So I mean, the list of projects, these are the older numbers. Actually, and this was 12 million. Shoot. But that included that wasn't just the main replacements. That included Dole Place. So I think it was about 8 million. I think the updated numbers are over 12 million for the main replacements. But anyhow, so that's going to be, so everyone agrees, invite the Water Commission in to present an updated capital program or the water main replacement program. Culvert stormwater improvements seem to be eligible for ARPA once we have once we know what our front burner projects are. We did look at the Middle Street Bridge. It looks like only the stormwater aspects of that might be eligible. I had a call come in from BSC on that because I asked them to look into that further, but I haven't connected with him yet.
What did I read recently? I tried to find it. I actually just saw a news alert, but I tried to find the thing. So what does the state have now, Angus? An actual new thing about bridges? What's anybody see that? It's just like last weekend.
What do you mean?
From the government, a new
is this
pot of
proposed
money related specifically to bridges.
Huh.
And this, is that a new program that it's either, I thought it would be proposed with ARPA funds, it's like $3.9 billion.
Right.
I thought it was a federal program. You just a state program?
I thought it was a state program.
State.
With the federal money.
Yeah. That's what it is. I tried to get the details of it, but I couldn't find it, but maybe it's too new. Okay. But they specifically mentioned small town bridges. So,
Yeah.
My ears break.
Right, yeah.
Baker introduces small bridge fix program in larger repair bill. It looks like it's for specific bridges, like already designated.
Yeah, send that over. We'll take a look at that.
5.2 million for 12 communities.
Okay.
Oh, that,
Sounds maybe like the small bridge program. Which,
that already exists.
Well, exactly.
You're right. This is a new thing, like, it was something like, it wasn't like 5 million, it was like 500 million.
yeah, I thought I heard something about it. When we talked about it, but I didn't hear anything else.
So now that the rule has been, issued, if what we'll do is just keep a running list. We'll still start to build it out. This is just a punch list, but we'll start to build out a little more detail. And if you guys have ideas that you think of or that you hear about out in the community, send them along for sure. Some communities, especially some larger communities, have done very proactive outreach and planning processes for the ARPA funds to really actively solicit ideas. We haven't done that yet, but we could do that. In a way, like we do have, I think, 2.5 years to expend the funds, and we already got a full plate, so I don't want to get 40 new proposals that we don't have time to do anything with.
Yeah.
But when the time is right, we could definitely invite, certainly Capital Committee and Board of Water Commissioners and all the, people with knowledge of Page School, get everyone together and say, this is the pot of money, what's the best uses. At the end of the day, it's up to you guys.
It's roughly equivalent to one normally gets a little bit more than, but it's roughly equivalent to one normally gets capital improvement funds.
That's right.
So arguably, you could say we can use it to get a year ahead on capital improvements. But I'm not saying it's wrong.
Yeah, but that's on the town side, not on the water side.
Right.
So I think that's going to be a big decision you guys will need to make at some point. Personally, I think it makes sense to invest in water because it's, there's not a realistic business plan of how that main replacement program is going to be financed. So I think they need all the help they can get. But philosophically, it is taxpayer money. And so that is, that is kind of that's not a small decision for you to make.
Yeah. Well, helping out the water system directly benefits roughly 60% of the homes in town. And less directly benefits pretty much everybody. And I think what you were pointing out, it does, the fact that we have a water system with hydrants covering much of town reduces everybody's insurance rates. Isn't that right?
Right, but that's one thing that if we get to that point for town meeting, we want to be able to say, well, these people, they don't have town water, but they have protection from hydrants. But we have to nail down where those spots are. Mike wasn't even sure about that. We have to work on that. Mike and Mike have to talk to each other. The hydrants versus, are there spots where there's actually hydrants but no water supply?
Okay. When you say hydrants but no water supply, you mean no pressure?
No, that they're not supplying a residential.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like you're near enough that you have protection from a hydrant.
Right. They can run a hose 500
Yeah.
feet and get to a hydrant. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a GIS map easily enough that would kind of show where there are parcels that abut the water system, but that are not customers. And just look at it that way. That would be kind of interesting. So I've been talking to Christian about, he's looking for guidance on where do we see the GIS system going. And I told him in the near term, I want to continue to proactively, utilize MVPC as much as we can and send them more, mapping needs that are really on point with our planning and infrastructure planning and operational planning needs. Longer term, I don't know if that's 2 years or 5 years, but I would like to work toward actually building the capacity in-house, meaning getting the ArcGIS license and getting him trained to actually do this kind of mapping in-house, because it would be, the MVPC does a nice job, but there's a certain amount of inefficiency there,
Right.
a lot of back and forth. You don't always get exactly what you want. And
So do we have enough other projects to use the LTA hours?
we do. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the hours in front, but we have me, Kristen and Leah have a pretty good. Yeah, we do. Yeah. Right now, we've got them working, for instance, on the whole issue of easements versus trails and that thing. And so, yeah, we're keeping them somewhat busy.
Okay. Great.
I think we can get more.
That would be good to have direct control over our own GIS.
Neighborhood control of this is very, very helpful.
Oh, it's in Westford, we used it left, right, and center. I mean, there almost wouldn't be a topic in front of you guys without some map like telling you exactly what we're talking about. It's so powerful.
We had direct control over it. And then when we find a problem, we can fix the problem right now instead of waiting here.
Mhm. I will say they've been pretty good on making mid-year updates on it, like us. Our scope is still once a year, but like with the Cortland Lane or with a couple of other things, if we're like, hey, look, we need this change now, they have been very good about that. All right, set it on ARPA.
I think so.
All right, next one.
Set the annual date, or the date for the spring annual and special town meeting. So I was hoping that we would be in a position to go to the normal schedule. But I think that would be foolish of us to assume that we could do that.
You could, if you wanted to see if Pentucket Auditorium was available that night, that's plenty large enough to have an indoor town meeting if with social distancing.
That seems to me that's worth exploring. So, yeah, how many people does that seat? So I mean, we'd have to figure, depending upon what's on, depending upon what's on it, we could have 200 people. What's on the wall. We could easily have 200 people.
We had all those numbers from the.
It's not that huge, Eric.
Right.
With like, if people want to be spread out, we're not going to get 200 people spread out.
Right. Yeah, the idea that was used before where we put people in the cafeteria, the cafeteria set up with a screen, that I think left a lot of unhappy voters.
Casey was very fan.
Right. So maybe that isn't really helpful. I mean, we don't know how many people will have, but is that in this packet, Angus, or is that a separate email?
Which
The articles.
page, yeah, it's in here, page 66. And that's, as I noted, very preliminary.
Yeah. Can't put your finger on the full page of paper. I think we need to be prepared for at least 200 people. And I'm not sure that the joint will be good for us to be adequately socially distanced. And the air circulation. Great.
No, it's probably better in the annex with higher ceiling and. The air is. Low ceiling.
Well, so, assuming then that we can't do it in there. Does anybody, Arch, Wendy, what do you think about it?
We kind of get used to the outdoor meetings.
Okay, I like it personally.
Yeah.
But I was also hoping that we could sort of go back to the old, to the intended schedule of town meeting before the town election.
The. Locked out on the weather every time, it's like, so.
And I wasn't gonna say this, but
It's gonna
but I'm
keep our
wondering.
train alive, while we pushing it up.
Yeah, I don't know, hard to say.
The meetings are shorter outdoors.
Yeah. They have gone pretty quickly. So if that's the case, then, if we do it outdoors, so there's Saturday the 14th, May, Saturday the 7th, Saturday the 14th. Probably not available. Personally.
Not that I want to crunch the timeline, but what if we moved up early?
But we couldn't, I mean, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, we can do that. Go at the time we have. Yeah, I think if you guys did decide to stick with the bylaw date, I think we would meet that time, but it would be, it'd be a crunch. Yeah, so certainly wouldn't want to see it sooner than that.
Well, I was only thinking the 23rd.
Every day counts. Every hour. There's a spread.
Yeah.
In terms of location, if it was to be outdoors, we're gonna have the same issue.
Oh, my God.
With,
Yeah.
with the youth sports and the bachelor
Can't we
fields.
get first dibs?
Well, this far ahead, I think we can, or is it already reserved?
We joked about this last fall, and we didn't do it.
And then the 4-hour, 20-minute meeting that Wendy and I attended on Thursday night, neither of us thought this. I didn't even think of it, but it would have been a good thing to bring up. 4-hour, 25-minute meeting. But I think in the past, they've indicated, Park and Rec Commission has indicated they're not inclined to bump youth sports. They own the Bachelor Street land. It's under their care and custody. They don't own the parking.
Well, we
Yeah.
approve the Park and Rec budget. Like, hello. Guess what? Budget this year is done.
Well, I guess it looks like the 7th and the 14th, 2 Saturdays. And that are a possibility in May.
And it's not, in my opinion, it's not critical that you pin down a date. What is critical, I think, or not critical, but what would be important is pinning down a warrant closing date, because we want to get the word out. Honestly, I'm kind of sorry I let it go this long. Normally I probably we would have talked about this at the last meeting, and it just, we didn't think of it. But I would like to get that warrant closing date pinned down so that we can circulate that to the departments and boards and committees and commissions, and that they have a few weeks of notice. I don't think it'll come as any surprise to anyone. Everyone knows it's usually around early February, early to mid-February. But that's one thing I do want to get that out. I don't want to see another 2 weeks go without having.
Well, how about February 14th?
And then the town meeting date TBD.
Well, why don't we, I think we should find out real soon if we can minimize conflict by going with one day or the other, 7th to the 14th,
Yeah, that's perfect.
with
With
other
youth
uses
sports.
of
So, I mean, it might be worth checking baseball, maybe different than soccer.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, do we have, there are two, that's right, two, three?
That's right. Yeah. It did. It was nice when it didn't have to be. Although in the end, we did make quorum. But ultimately.
I have to say, I don't like the afternoon as well, just
Oh, I don't know.
personally. But it's right in the middle, it kills the whole,
Hopefully,
Okay.
there's no drama this time around in terms of choosing a date and conflict with other uses. This seems really silly, but, you know, that town meeting basically was responsible for making the rest of the town, funding the rest of the town. Can't get space.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry I didn't have time to look into that more.
Yeah.
Because those are obvious questions that I
Yeah,
just
we'll
didn't.
figure it out another thing. So
Yeah,
we're gonna-
yeah. No, but that's, we got to get down to, and I want to also, get, get your office more involved with the logistics, because that would be helpful.
Maybe we should talk about scheduling for next fall's town.
So in terms of, potential articles, it's kind of like more of a brainstorm than anything. I did meet with Wayne today and he brought, a handful of other ones to my attention, not reflected here. So there's only one of those. I'm happy to tell you everything he told me, but there is one I wanted to just float to get your thoughts on it. So why don't we stick with the list and then I can turn to this.
what page are we on
This is page 66.
now? Oh, wait, back.
Okay.
Okay.
Or I can tell you what Wayne told me. I just don't want to take it out of order. But there are a few that he intends to propose. One is the custodian's truck that had been proposed in a prior cycle and kicked forward. There's actually a hole in the floor of the truck. It's rusting out. So that's about $30,000 that he's going to propose that through the capital process. He's also going to propose replacement of the 1-ton dump truck. That's more like a $92,000 to $95,000, also capital. He has a number of facility needs that I think totaled about 90 grand, but he'll outline all of those, and not all of those that needs a little work. They're going to propose replacing the backup generator for the Garden Street Fire Station. That's estimated about $20,000. If it needed to, it could wait a year, but it should be on our radar. This is really the question I have. So we've talked about the town office phone system. We've made some headway on that, including getting an RFP from a town that did, swap out all its phone system with voice over IP, which is the way everyone's going. We don't really have any sense of what kind of cost we're talking about. We know it's tens of thousands. I'm hesitant to put a number out there because we really don't know. We do have names of 3 or 4 potential vendors. So we could call someone and start to have them sharpen their pencil and work up a better number. But we don't want to do that and waste someone's time if this is not something we're going to propose for next year. So if you as a board think that that's an important enough issue that we ought to do it, then we will do the work of getting to a real number. But we don't want to waste someone's time, have them do all this, and then we're like, oh, we'll call you next year because it's.
So my understanding of the system, at this point is that it does cause operational problems from time to time. And that parts are becoming increasingly unavailable.
Mhm.
And at some point, there's more than just a possibility, a likelihood that something's going to fail and the system's not going to be repairable. Is that right?
100% correct.
Okay. So, I mean, it seems to me to be a no-brainer, because if the phone system fails here and just plain doesn't work, then, you know, your primary means of communicating with much of the world, obviously a lot happens on the computer, but it just goes away.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. That's all correct. And the one thing I would add, which isn't so much a harm as it is a lost opportunity, you know, when I worked in Westford and they had the voice over IP, you get a voicemail, it gets sent to your email. So you're out remote, you get, you know, it's like, so it's not something, it's just an opportunity. Like we would be that much more efficient if we had that. So, but everything you said is correct. It's totally, you know, it's hanging by a thread, and the computer that runs it is sitting in the, you know, like if that went down, it would be a huge problem. There is only one vendor who services the system. It's not cheap. Every time we pick up the phone and bring him in, it's $400. It's become next to impossible to find parts. We're getting to, you know, we have old phones that we're repurposing parts to make things work. It's held together with a Band-Aid. So I think it's definitely a no-brainer, but like I said, I mean, again, I don't want to put a number out there, but it's going to be more expensive than people probably think it should be. You know, you need a new server just for your phone. You know, you need to replace every phone in the building, which each of them costs some amount of money. It adds up, and it's tens of thousands, you know, perhaps several tens. So I just didn't want to go too far without at least floating the trial balloon.
Anybody else any thought? I mean, I think personally, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it ought to be done because otherwise you're halfway out of it.
Okay, well, that's 2 out of 3. I won't put you on the spot, Archie. You can wait till you have a real number to respond. The other things Wayne mentioned.
Anytime servers are involved, the price goes crazy.
Yeah. They're looking to, Wayne and Chief Dwyer are looking to replace the AEDs in the buildings and the cruisers. The total combined cost to do all of those at once would be about $34,000, but it could be broken into 2 years, which, you know, that's partly a strategic thing, because if it was broken into 2 years, it's below the capital threshold. Maybe it could be a free cash. There is some overhead associated with going through the capital process. So that's something I asked him about, like, you know.
What's up with those?
Just the meetings, with the AEDs, just that they have a useful life. And there's Mike Dwyer, and he was meeting with Wayne. I haven't talked to Dwyer about it yet, but I gather there's some efficiency with doing them all, if not right at the same time, around the same time, because then they're on a similar schedule, and you're getting all the same specifications. Right now, we have different AEDs in different buildings are different, you know, ages, different manufacturers. So there would be some benefit to having a common apparatus. But, you know, Dwyer is going to do a much better job articulating that in the proposal than I can do based on my superficial understanding of it. So I just learned about some of these today. So the Page School telecom equipment, Rick, I know we've talked about this, and you probably have some thoughts on it, but if you look at the you know, that old Park and Rec building to the left of Page School, and that you know, antenna up above, we have gotten a quote to remove that and to, you know, basically put a little something on the top of Page School that would allow that tower to be taken off. That would be about $40,000 to do that. That's something we recommend. So
To put it somewhere else?
to put it on the top of Page School.
Oh,
It's necessary for you know, public safety telecom.
And how close to failure is the current? I mean, you know, I have to fix something, but you know, I mean, why does it have to be? I guess this is a conversation we can have.
Yeah. I think that's something Dwyer and Wayne are going to be better able to speak to that. And then I also know, and Wayne mentioned this to me, there's been discussion about a potential audit for emerald ash borer and removal plan, which would include like GPSing and tagging trees that are, going to need to be removed. And Wayne did reach out to Bartlett Tree on that, and he has a preliminary cost estimate on that of $34,000. So I don't know if all of these are going to come forward, but these, in the known anticipated potential, they're at least potential, and some of them are known. So, and I'm sure there's going to be more because we haven't even put a call out for warrant articles yet. But there's a few in this memo that I think are, definitely worth some. I mean, you're going to get a lot more information as the process goes forward, but we always try to share what we know about what might be coming.
Yeah, okay.
Like a lot of master plan articles.
Well, that's a really, really interesting topic because there is, I think, a lot of support from residents, from the planning board, I think from this board, from myself, from Leah, on the idea that, or not an idea, but, we need to update the comp master plan. When and how, that's the question. And there is a grant that Leah's been, had an eye on that could support up to $75,000 toward that cost, which would be a huge plus. And there is a potential that there'd be a proposal at the Springtown meeting to appropriate, the net cost. We do think it would be about $200,000 to update the comp plan, to get a consultant and to do it right. But now with this MBTA communities legislation and the time specific mandates to have like a plan by the end of next December, you can see with the thread with Tim and Leah that they, I think the thinking now is we might have to deal with that first, even if the decision is to not try to comply. You might want to go through some amount of planning to make that decision. Or you might not. You might feel, when the time comes that we know enough that we don't want to even try.
Yeah, so there are 3 or 4 state programs that we would no longer be eligible for. Is that right, Steve?
I know MassWorks, and I know there's others. I haven't looked at it in a week or two, so I don't have it on the front of my mind. But yeah, there's some sticks if you don't.
Right.
If you don't participate. It's not clear that there's carrots if you do, but there's sticks if you don't.
I'm just looking at this list, there's 3 or 4 master plans, so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see your point. Yeah, no,
So there's a
totally.
comp plan, and maybe we don't need to do the master plan for every project that comes up.
Well, I mean, one of the things I talked to Rick about, this idea of the water hydraulic study and master plan. So I guess the last one was done, I want to say, was it either 2009 or 2013? It was a while ago. And it's a really important document. I think it's one of the, probably a foundational thing that you might want to do before you do a comp plan, because it's so important to informing a comp plan.
I don't even know what that is. So what is that?
Which comprehensive plan?
No, like a hydraulic and,
Water hydraulic stuff.
I think it's looking at the capacity of the system that you have, understanding, what flow rates are possible, what pressures are, what your pressure drops are along the pipes. And also quality or, condition of portions of the system, a leach section system. I assume that's what.
And also demand,
We just built a new water tank. It better be.
Well, that's good, but then, so that's your source, or that's your storage, and then, then you've got distributed all over, and that's what the issue is.
Right.
Then now,
These might be like stuff we don't want to know. We know we have to replace a bunch of mains, they find out that we have to replace it.
So I guess, the bottom line for this is this was installed, was it through this program,
The Public Works
Yeah.
or Works Progress,
WPA,
WPA, yeah,
The WPA.
yeah.
It was done by, through WPA back in the 1930s. So that's when the system was built.
Oh, it was?
And so much of the system, that's when it was put in. So it's now, 85 to 90 years old.
Yeah, so this came up at the Board of Water Commission meeting, I think, was it last Monday or 2 Mondays ago? Must have been last Monday. Man.
What do you mean? You only had 27 meetings.
You're right, pretty much. So, but Mike Goutte had floated this idea, and I think it's a great idea because we need, if the last one we have is a decade old, it would be good to have, current understanding of that, and especially in light of anticipated transition on leadership of that department. You want to make sure to capture as much of Mike's institutional knowledge as we can in the time that we have with him.
Right.
So, but that would be a proposal of the Board of Water Commissioners, presumably from water retained earnings. So it's not something you guys need to, but I've made a note to circulate the most recent one, so and so I know better exactly what we're talking about. Because I don't have it electronically. So if we don't have it, we can digitize it.
How long ago was it done? I thought that I recalled seeing something in the last couple of years. Not something new, but having been copied on it.
No, they do their rate study. No, it was either 2013 or 2009. I can't remember what it was.
I think it was 2009. That was my foray into town.
Was it? Okay. Okay.
So was it being done when you were on the board,
I was
or?
on the committee. There was a
Okay.
hydraulic study committee.
Okay.
Actually worked with Tita
Oh, okay.
and Bardeen.
Okay. Hey, so can you help us all understand beyond what Rick said, like what?
I can't remember the phone.
Okay, all right.
Basically, the outcome.
I don't have my notes from last Monday's meeting with me. Since 2 p.m. today.
Is the new updated well being used? We never find, we always give money out, and we never know if any of this stuff actually gets finished. I know it does, but I never hear.
Yeah, it is finished. And it's been a couple of months because, one of the things we have to do at that point is officially put it on the town insurance and remove the builder's risk insurance. And that was something I was involved with a couple of months ago. And I think it's up and running, but I haven't gotten like a nice little report on that. So I'm sure Mike would be happy to brief you on that when he's here. And he's probably sent me an email on it. I mean, I know it is, but I don't. Oh, yeah, we didn't vote on the warrant closing date.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I think I just threw it out February 14th, and that was based on conversation and I had had it. But all right, I move that we set February 14th as the warrant closing date.
Second.
Discussion.
So, a placeholder can still be.
Yeah, the way it's been handled is, and it's really up to the board, it's the board's warrant. is that as long as there's a placeholder language by the time it closes, there's some amount of time after that for all the details to be worked out. That is a cultural thing in different towns. It is different. Some towns want everything buttoned up. I don't think that's constructive because it's not the way the world works. So this board's been pretty flexible. As long as by the warrant closing date, there's a clear idea of what's being proposed and why, there's some time to work out the details, including, for instance, funding amounts. Until the board posts the warrant, which can be as late as 14 days prior to town meeting, it's not set. So,
So I was thinking like on the housing trust bylaw.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be ready by.
Oh, no, but that's already, you've already got a placeholder.
So, yeah, that's interesting to think about it, for the MVP grant, it's possible we would significantly strengthen our position on some portion of the grant request by having matching funds. And can't comment on that yet, where that would be, what it would need to be. But it's something for us to think about and have a placeholder for. And then if it turns out we don't need it, then we just get funded through it. What do you think about that?
I think it's a fine idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, typically, you have matching, and then, the match doesn't always have to be cash, it can be kind, but it's some cash too much.
Yeah, we have the FinCom meeting this Thursday, and part of what we're going to talk about is the budget calendar and timeline. And typically they have 4 or 5 meetings, typically starting in, mid to late February, running through mid to late March. If it's a financial article, you definitely want to make sure you have the details well enough ahead of their last meeting.
Yeah.
But Gary Roberts has been, really great on, like, if I tell him, hey, we're not so sure on these, we know they're coming, we just don't know the details, we'll put them on the last agenda and fill the pipeline with the things we do know.
Yeah.
He's been really accommodating about that, and the FinCom's been really understanding about that. If it's a non-financial article like the housing trust bylaw, they're not even you don't even need to be worried about that timeline. There's even more time if you need it. Oh, just briefly on the second to last one, the study of pipe stave mill pond parking circulation. I don't know if that'll come together, but we are, a lot better off than we were when we talked about this 2 years ago. We have invited TEC, which is the vendor doing the safety audit, since they're becoming familiar with that general area and they specialize in safe routes to schools and these kinds of things. We have invited them to give us a proposal for more of the sites internal to pipe stave. So if we get the proposal and we like it, we'll bring it to you guys and ask you to put it on the warrant or not. But we will have a better scope and budget that we can either go forward with or not. It's a lot to take on, with everything else we're trying to do. But, as we know, and it was just reinforced the other night, Park and Rec, it's just festering. Like, it's just festering. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but that does make a lot of sense from the standpoint of using the same vendor. I mean, they're interfaced sites, interfaced projects. And so as opposed to having one vendor do it today and another vendor do it a year from today, having the same vendor, probably there's got to be some economies in use of the same data. I'm sure there's data collection required, and that's, there's going to be redundancy.
Didn't we put this as an article and it failed?
No, we had put it as a placeholder in right around this time of year in 2020. Wayne and I had recommended it because we didn't feel that we could solve the problem without, some engineering. But we never got as far as having a scope and budget. And then when COVID hit, it kind of, anything that wasn't done just kind of fell by the wayside. But part of why we invited the proposal from DEC is with the scope we have for the safety audit, it's very confined. You know, we have the state earmark, so it's got to be fully complete by the end of June. So we need to keep them focused, but we are fully aware that as we get into the public meetings on that, some amount of the public input we get is not going to be on that intersection. It's going to be on the internal issue. So we at least want to be able to say that's, you know, we haven't forgotten about that. That's coming down the road.
Yeah, but so there's a case where they're gonna get feedback potentially to use on a later project.
Correct.
That
Yeah.
they would need to get, so, you know, there's an efficiency there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, with the initial kickoff meeting we had last Wednesday, which, you know, was a 2-hour plus meeting, they already, you know, we had members of Riding and Driving Club, we had Brad Bashore there from Park and Rec. They didn't, you know, they didn't get the full background, but they got enough of exposure to it to start to understand some of the issues.
Yeah.
So it was good. Oh, no, we have motion and a second. Yep.
Come on, Rick. Yeah, that's okay, I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye. It was because I didn't expect discussion, and then you came up with a question. Here you are.
All right, so the warrant will close February 14th. And just so you know, it doesn't automatically close, even though you've said that tonight. It will be on your agenda for February 14th, and until you actually vote to close it,
Yeah.
it doesn't close, so. You see, you'll be asked to put a question on the ballot, so that Christian has asked to be on the 31st agenda, and I've told him I've penciled him for that. It should be really a housekeeping issue.
If you want to turn 70, you get a dog.
Different issue. That's
So
something,
that's the town meeting.
That's a-
That's actually a town meeting.
that's a very housekeeping
Okay.
thing, that we were supposed to adopt this.
Oh, right, okay.
This is on the taxation of the
This
agricultural.
is totally different from the assessors thing. Totally different.
In terms of budget, I'll keep it real simple. I do want, I know the board knows this, but for anyone still listening, the board policy direction for FY23 sets a target for me to propose a budget with a bottom line increase, not including schools, of no more than 2.5%. So if you look at the FY22 budget, that would translate to about $200,000. We know what our FY23 retirement assessment is, and we've been given an estimated health insurance estimate, which is 8.5 to 10% increase.
Yeah.
We don't know that. We don't get that a firm number until mid-February from Maya, but for budgeting purposes, that's what I'm carrying is 8.5%. Not adjusting to account for any potential new benefits eligible staff. When you add just retirement and estimated health insurance, we're at 109,000 out of 200. So I just wanted to get that out there because it helps to illustrate it's going to be a really difficult budget season. And that's before you get into Whittier. We know is going up about 113,000 because of 5 new students. And we don't have a number from Pawtucket, but based on the meeting we had today, it's very clear that there's going to be a significant proposed increase that is in all likelihood going to require overrides in the other 2 towns. It's not all bad news there. We do think budgeted recycling costs will fall next year, but I did want to get the point out there that meeting that target is going to be really difficult. That's all I had to say on the budget thing. If it wasn't so late, we might start talking about other things, but that was the main point I wanted to get across.
Did you have anything?
What, Angus, what did you say about retirement? I'm sorry.
11.4%.
11 point.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I'm gonna talk to those people.
Yeah.
They need to come talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not performing.
You say they're not performing.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna get 11, remember the S&P went up 20% in the last fiscal, just this year, yeah. Okay, so that's an outlier, that's super good. So we're going up 11% after a 20% increase in the S&P for last year. What's gonna happen when we have a bad year of the S&P? What's the retirement assessment gonna be? That just doesn't.
Yeah, I don't see it makes sense.
We have a really good relationship with them. We could invite Chuck Costro and I bet, especially with the role participation, I bet we can get him on an agenda in the next 2 months or sooner. I think it'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to last year, but with COVID and everything, no, but now let's see what's going on. Because
Yeah.
we've had 2 really good market performing years and our assessments been going up dramatically. So what happens when we have bad years?
Yeah.
We're gonna have like a 50% increase?
So last year, well, I mean, a few months ago, Caitlin found an error in that. Was that? Oh, you found it, okay. You found an error.
Jenny proved the error and she
Okay,
brought it down to the penny,
okay,
but the numbers didn't ever look right.
okay.
And then the ERS board voted at their last meeting in June to reduce our assessment by about 32,000 because last year's assessment was in error.
Yeah, okay.
So it's
But-
possible this year is an error. as
I
well.
had Jenny look at the, once we got it, I mean, 11.4% jumped up. I had her look at it and she said it all looks correct to her. And part of what we do, which Jenny has been enormously helpful with, is we have to allocate between general fund and water. So they just give us a number and we have to allocate that based on, the wages that inform that. And Jenny is good. She's great at that. And so she was able to give me like exactly, this is the water share, this is the town share. So she did say it all looked good to her, and I had to present to the water board last, Monday that their amount was X, which is a proportionally higher increase because they added a new full-time person. And I reminded them, that does translate to increased retirement and so forth. So they weren't happy about the number, but they understood it. So we don't think it's an error, unfortunately. Yeah, last year's error, it was kind of like a fluke. It was concerning, but it was. So we have signed a contract with the Collins Center, so they're officially under contract. And the only change from what you have seen previously on the scope is that we did rough in some dates. It says anticipated. We did that on purpose because, we want to deliver this, but there is some front end work and, we're doing what we can, but, I hope we can beat this timeline, but it all depends on the bandwidth to actually, for instance, getting, we did get them the list last week of the 45 positions that would be part of the study. I thought it was like going to be 35. It's actually more like 45. But we now have to get them job descriptions and they're not like all in one server where it's just a click and drag. That does take some piecing together. And so anyhow, but I think they're going to be great. I've been very, very impressed. We've had several Zoom calls and they're really knowledgeable. So we're very eager to get them started. But we do have to get them what they need to really get started. So unfortunately, with a budget due in 2 weeks, it's very hard to find the time to do all this stuff.
I had a question on the side. Does classification mean grade level and task 7? Classification and compensation.
Yes.
Okay. Because in task 3 classification, that's just exempt and non-exempt.
Correct, yeah, and that was something I had added in there from the earlier draft. It's a lot of work. This is
Yeah, I
gonna
was
be a lot
surprised
of.
at the cost. I mean, it seems like a lot of work for that.
I told them, because initially we thought 15, and then once we zoomed in December and they started to get a better sense of some of the nuanced issues, they went to 35, or I'm sorry, to 25. And then when I sent them the number last week, because that was based on an estimate of 35 positions, when we put pen to paper and put, and we left out the union positions. We left out a couple of positions like the recycling coordinator who staffs on Saturdays. Like we made a decision on 7 or 8 positions that are just the summer rec. We left those out of the scope. They're we just don't have the bandwidth and they're not. Anyhow, but even after having those, selective, we're still at 45. So when I sent them that list last week, I said, this is a bigger number than we talked about. If the budget needs to change, let me know that. They didn't let me know that, but if we get partway down the road and they say, hey, this is way more difficult than we thought, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm not surprised. We do have more money than the 25 if we need it. Because we had budgeted 15K last year. We encumbered that, so we carried that full amount forward, plus we have the 15K grant, so it could go up to 30 and that would not be an issue.
And the 15K grant was a community compact.
Correct.
So this just makes me go back to the warrant articles. We talked about carrying something there to adjustment based on this.
Yeah, my preference, and I know we've still got Stephanie on. I don't know if she wants to jump in or not, but we both think that doing that within the operating budget would be better rather than a standalone article, primarily for accounting reasons. Basically, because when you run things through the operating budget, all those ancillary costs, the payroll deductions, it's like it flows a lot better if you start paying payroll costs out of an article when you're doing your workers' comp audits and when you're doing your reporting on wages. It like just adds some complexity that it just would be more straightforward. So we're envisioning maybe a line within the operating budget that's like wage adjustments. That's
Just do line item transfers to individual.
We haven't figured all that out because you can't do a line item transfer till May or June. Ideally, we'd have the information. There could be, those adjustments could be made before it's voted, but that's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to come together that quickly. So we have to figure that out. But it's not without precedent. Other towns have done
No,
this.
that's what's gonna be my question too.
Yeah.
Like,
So I can speak a little bit.
like put it with DPW and finance and like, because then the DPW budget won't reflect that.
If we don't know where we're carrying it, we won't know that. Right.
Yeah.
If we do, great, but it all depends on, can we push this through, quick enough with everything else we're doing. Stephanie, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I can speak to one of the questions. What we would do, I don't know if Archie asked it or someone asked, we would transfer the funding from the main line from where we appropriated it into each budget after the fact. But like Angus said, we would have to wait until May or June to do that, but we could still expend it because the money is within the budget. So there are ways around that. Does that help?
That makes sense, okay, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Ideal. It's not ideal, but it's doable. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you were to do it in early May, where you have, almost 1/6 of the year left, unless your average salaries have increased, 16 to 17%, which not going to be the case. in theory, timing would work okay, right, with line item transfers. Because if you had budgeted for the entire year at the old salary.
Oh, that's a really good
as long
point,
as-
yeah.
As long as.
You wouldn't have actually overspent. You
Yeah,
might be on the
wouldn't have
precipice,
overspent,
but
you would
that's
be on
actually,
track to overspend,
yeah, that's actually a really good point.
But
Yeah,
you wouldn't have done that, yeah.
that's a really good point.
Hopefully they're not going up
Yeah,
47%.
So item K, page pipe save Main Street. This was a great kickoff. We had really good, I think there were only maybe 9 or 10 of us there, including the consultant. So it wasn't like a huge number of people, but we had some really key people, a couple of people from the Riding and Driving Club. Brad was there from Park and Rec. Wayne and I were there, Chief Durand's, Page School. John Dodge couldn't make it, but I feel like one of the members there was on it. Yeah. And also Kathy Fury, who's also obviously on Concom. So it was a really good discussion. There was a lot of value, and it was very preliminary. This was just a kickoff. No decisions were made. It was really just a scoping meeting. Even though the scope's set, but and then we walked around and we walked down to the Mill Ponds driveway and we walked into Pipe Stave a little bit. And I think it was very, very helpful to the consultants to really get a good on the ground understanding. It just reinforced, what we already know. It's a really tough location between the, top of the hill and the curves and site distance and the multiple driveways. It's a tough site, but I think it was a very good start to the process. So, and they have been getting comments to this, public comment email account that's going to help to us at a staff level to have those going direct to the vendor. We're not to pass through, and then they consolidate all that. So we'll work to get some dates penciled in for the February, March timeframe to start to get some higher public profile for their work. There's a lot of interest in it. Oh, one thing that actually did come up that was kind of interesting. We knew that Paige with the principal had taken steps toward becoming eligible for Safe Routes to Schools grants. Which is good. What we didn't fully understand until last week is that they had Page School had envisioned kind of a Safe Routes to Schools grant dealing with internal circulation on the site and bus drop off and car pickup and that kind of thing. And so at the meeting, it became clear that, oh, well, you guys have this in mind. We're really have our eye on this for ideally implementing some portion of the recommendations that come from this study. And that was good to realize that we were kind of like on parallel tracks. And so what we talked about with Wayne in particular was the Safe Routes to Schools grant. There's a fair amount of money. I think the maximum grant is like $1 million. You can get real money with that to do capital projects. And the nature of the things that Emily Pateri had gotten from there, and I'll send it around. I almost put it in the packet, but I thought it would confuse things. But she sent around a slide deck last Tuesday, the day before the meeting, showing these internal circulation striping and things. Wayne said, we could probably implement all of that for like cheap money. We do not want to use up the Safe Routes to Schools grant on something that we could fund as a town. We'd much rather like go after the big money. He was kind of joking that DOT, yeah, here's a couple of traffic cones and some striping. You're done. We don't want to. So anyhow, but that was something that like was good that we became aware of that now. I'll send you that. But there's basically, they have their Safe Routes to Schools ideas that are internal to the site. I think they gained a better understanding, the Page School did, of like what we're looking at and the bigger picture in the public infrastructure. And then L is really just in there as informational. Stephanie, I've done a fair amount of work to put this memo together, and I think it's a good, Park and Rec has always been a kind of complicated budgetary structure, and no one had ever like at least in the modern era, put together like all in one place. These are the accounts. These are who has the authority, this is what they can be used for and so forth. So I think Park and Rec was glad to have that. We did talk about the summer program Thursday night. We got some guidance. We have some more questions to answer. So we're working on that. I did get a bunch of additional information just earlier today from longtime coordinators of that. So we're continuing to work on that. Clock is ticking. I mean, we got to get that worked out if, because there's a lot of work to do to put together the summer
I
program.
think you mentioned that the, what was the name of the company that does the online?
Oh, my rec. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that one.
That's looking pretty good.
That looks great. Yeah, everybody loved it. The commission voted to authorize funding for half of the amount. I'm going to pay the balance out of my operating budget because part of the functionality that I've envisioned is for the room rentals. And I think everybody was really impressed by the platform, the customer service, the level of understanding that the vendor clearly has on municipal rec operations, from field use scheduling, room bookings, youth sports teams, waiver forms, vaccine forms, nut allergy, they really understand like exactly what you need. And their platform is fully designed to do all of that. And anyhow, it was terrific. It was a really impressive presentation. And so we have entered a contract with them. And again, that's now, to get that up and running and to build out that site timely for the summer, that's going to rely on a fair amount of time fairly soon.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we're trying to get done right now, but it's worth it because it's going to pay off and it's going to make things much more efficient.
You said it was like a couple of grand.
It's only $3,000. Yeah. They do it based on the amount of revenues that you process. So if we ever were to hit 100,000 in revenue, it would go up modestly. I asked the guy on the phone last week before the meeting, how do you make your money? He said, well, if we do a good job, once you use our platform, you're there year after year after year, and there's next to no effort once they get you set up. So I guess he said they have business from Alaska to like Georgia. So I knew they were based in Vermont. I knew I worked with them in Maine. I knew they did a lot of work in this region. So I thought of them as like New England. I didn't realize they were doing this work all over.
So it costs them money up front, but overall
Yeah, because
They
the
just
platform
host.
is fully, it's a very robust. I mean, you can do online credit card payment. You can, it handles the confidentiality issues associated with, uploading like people's medical, prescription, sheets. I think he said they had, everything's backed up every 15 minutes and then daily through the Amazon web server. It's a very, very impressive platform. I think everybody was, and in fact, I was visited today by a member of the Riding and Driving Club asking, could they start running their programs through there? And I explained that might be like step 3 or 4. I'm step 1 or 2, which is going to take me until the fall. So she understood. But they were like, they'd love to run their registrations through there. And I think the Youth League and others might, actually, she mentioned the Garden Club. I said, maybe once we master it, then.
So I personally have no objection to that, but that's a capacity that's paid for with taxpayer dollars.
No, I told her that if the town was to entertain that in the future, there would have to be a fee.
Yeah.
And it's not something we could offer to one group without being prepared to offer it to any group. And that's a capacity issue. I remind her, we don't have a single staff person whose job it is to do this. And so that means, it falls on a couple of us to make it happen. So. But yeah, there was, Wendy was at the meeting. I think it's fair to say everybody was like blown away. It's a very impressive. Yeah.
Very user friendly.
Very user friendly. Yeah.
Good, well, that's another step in the right direction. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I wish I'd thought to record that because it was a really great session and I'm sure they can do another one for us, but.
All right, well, I think we're done. Let's move to adjourn. Got a second?
Can't we talk about catch basins?
You can sit here as long as you want. Wait a second.
Yeah.
All in favor? All right.
Is this what we have to sign?
Yes.